He believed he was abandoning weakness. In truth, he was feeding a monster built from his own arrogance. Marcus did not simply betray a wife. He betrayed a woman who had buried power beneath silence and mistook her restraint for insignificance. In his mind, Elena was a stepping stone he had outgrown. But this story is not about a divorce. It is about the violence of underestimation. The tragedy is almost poetic. The man who chased status discarded the one person who already stood above the world he wanted, and in doing so, he watered the very ruin that would bloom over his life.
What happens when the woman you judged as mundane is unveiled as the most powerful figure you have ever known? Tonight, Marcus Hale would grasp that some miscalculations are not merely expensive, they are ruinous. 7 years ago, he married a woman who seemed serene, uncomplicated, and forgettable. Tonight, among the city's elite, he would see her again. She would not be alone. She would be on the arm of a man whose name could unnerve billionaires. And Marcus would finally understand he hadn't divorced a homemaker. He had dethroned a queen. Follow this narrative to its end. Comment and register your city of observation. I want to monitor this story's reach. The downpour that Thursday night was relentless, drumming a ceaseless beat on the windows of the unassuming home on Maple Street. Inside, Alara Quinn moved about the kitchen with an efficient grace, her hands steady as she prepared their dinner. The knife descended in a soft, rhythmic cadence against the cutting board, a sound made familiar over 7 years of marriage. 7 years. She stilled her hand, the blade hovering, letting the numbers settle. 7 years crafting meals that often went cold. 7 years tending a house that rarely felt like a home. 7 years being exactly what Marcus needed. Silent, undemanding, and invisible. The front door crashed open. Alara did not flinch. She had learned to read Marcus's arrivals like signals. The rhythm of his footsteps, the way he dropped his briefcase, the particular quality of the silence that followed. Tonight's entrance broadcasted frustration bordering on rage, a familiar pattern. "You're home early," she noted, her voice even as she returned to her work. Marcus appeared in the archway, yanking at his tie with sharp, frustrated pulls. At 34, he had the kind of generic good looks that suited a corporate brochure, but revealed little under scrutiny. His suit was better now, a sharp contrast from when they first met. Success had given him a thin veneer of polish, but had stripped away what little warmth he ever possessed. "We must have a conversation." His tone was barren, a business dealing. Alara set the knife aside and turned, drying her hands on a cloth. Very well, she observed the man she had chosen to love, the man for whom she had hidden herself away. Even then, anticipating what was to come, she recognized the look in his eyes. It was the expression of a verdict already passed, where her testimony was meaningless. Still, some small, irrational part of her hoped she was wrong. "I'm moving out this weekend," Marcus announced. No prelude, no softening of the blow. "My attorney will be in touch about dissolving the marriage." The words hung in the air between them, brutal and final. Alara's hands went still. There was no sharp intake of breath, no welling of tears, no plea to reconsider. She just stood there, absorbing the information as she had absorbed 1,000 smaller cruelties over the years. Silently, completely. "It's our anniversary today," she said, her voice a low murmur. Marcus had the decency to look away, but only for a second. "Yes, I know. That's why I'm telling you now. A clean break." "A clean break?" Alara echoed the words as if testing their weight. "Is there someone else? That is not relevant to this discussion." "So, yes," he admitted with a shrug, and that single careless motion was more of a confession than any words. He wasn't invested enough to even construct a plausible lie. "Victoria Ashford?" Alara said, not as a question. Marcus's eyes narrowed. How did you know? I am your wife, Marcus. Not blind. She folded the towel with meticulous, deliberate movements. You've been taking calls in other rooms, coming home smelling of a perfume I don't wear. At the firm's holiday party, you never strayed far from her side. If you knew all this, why didn't you say anything? Would it have changed the outcome? The question hung between them, unanswered. They both knew the answer. Marcus had stopped caring for her opinion long before he started seeking another's company. Victoria understands my ambitions, Marcus said, his voice becoming defensive. She comes from that world. She can help me get ahead. You can't? Let's be frank, Alara. He made a vague gesture at her, at the kitchen, at their simple life. This isn't my world anymore. I've moved beyond it. The partners at my firm, the clients I deal with now, they exist on a different level. Victoria's father owns half the commercial property downtown. Her family has the influence I need. So, my usefulness has run its course. Don't make it sound so cold. But it is cold, isn't it? You're making an upgrade. Alara's voice was controlled, almost unnervingly calm. I'm just curious. When did you decide? When did you look at me and determine that I was no longer enough? Marcus shifted, clearly uncomfortable. This was not going as he had scripted. He had prepared for tears, maybe shouting, a desperate attempt to change his mind. This quiet, analytical dissection of his motives was deeply unsettling. It wasn't one specific moment, he said finally. It was gradual. I just realized we want different lives. We want different lives, Alara repeated softly. Is that the story you've settled on? What do you want me to say? That I regret it? Fine. I regret that it failed, but I don't regret choosing a future that has real potential. Potential? The word tasted like ash in Alara's mouth. And what was I? A placeholder until something better came along. You're twisting this. Am I? For the first time, a sharp edge entered her voice. Not of rage, but of something far colder. You were nothing when I met you, Marcus. A junior associate drowning in student loans, pulling 80-hour weeks in an office that smelled of stale coffee. I was the one who saw you through every professional stumble, every passed-over promotion, every client who treated you like dirt. I was the one who made this place a sanctuary while you chased your ambition. And I'm thankful for that, but I'm not presentable enough for your new life, not connected enough, not rich enough. Alara's hands were now clasped tightly in front of her. You're not even going to pretend there's another reason, are you? Marcus's jaw tightened. You want the unvarnished truth? Fine. Look at yourself, Alara. When did you last see the inside of a salon? When did you last buy something that wasn't on a clearance rack? You're happy with this. He gestured around the kitchen. This small life. I'm not small. The word was a bare whisper. I'm making partner next year. Partner. Do you have any idea what that means? The galas I have to attend, the people I need to impress. I need a wife who belongs in that world. Victoria knows how to command a room. She knows what to wear, what to say, and who is important. She elevates me. You drag me down. You make me look average. The words landed with more venom than he intended, but he didn't take them back. I am not average, Alara. I am not meant for this suburban life of scheduled dinners and saving for a single yearly trip. I never was. Alara took this in, as she had everything else, silently with a chilling composure that had always disturbed Marcus on the rare occasions he noticed it. Even now, as her world fractured, and her 7-year commitment was written off as a loss. She did not shatter. She did not scream. She denied him the release of a reaction he could process. "When did you become this person?" she asked softly. "What person?" "Someone who measures people by their utility. Someone who sees a relationship as a merger." Marcus grabbed his briefcase. "You know, I didn't come here for a character analysis. I came to tell you it's over. My lawyer will call you. You can have the house. I'll cover the mortgage until it sells." "How generous. Don't be bitter. It doesn't suit you." He stopped at the door, half turning back. "For what it's worth, you were a good wife. You just weren't the right one." "For what it's worth," Alara said quietly, "you were never the man I thought you were, but I told myself you could be." A flicker of something crossed Marcus's face. Guilt, maybe, or recognition, but it was gone as quickly as it came. "I'll send men for my things on Saturday. Don't make this any harder than it has to be." "Marcus," he paused, waiting. "Does Victoria know?" "Know what?" "That you're capable of this. That when her value dips, when a better opportunity presents itself, you'll cast her aside just as easily as you're casting me aside now." His face hardened. "That's the difference between you and her. She isn't replaceable." After he left, Alara stood in the kitchen for a very long time, listening to the rain and the new, profound silence of the house. The vegetables she'd been chopping lay untouched on the board. The pot of water she'd put on the stove had gone completely cold. The room held the stillness of a life caught in amber, a moment of profound interruption. She moved with a measured grace into the living room, sinking into the couch they chose together 5 years prior. Leather, Marcus had wanted. She'd argued for the warmth of fabric, a small battle he had conceded, one of many before he grew tired of yielding. A detached thought surfaced. She was supposed to weep now. This was the scene for tears. An ending. Her husband had found her lacking, rendering 7 years into a postscript for his own story. Women in films shattered at this point. They wept into phones or broke the man's prized possessions. Alara remained perfectly still. The subject was framed by failing afternoon light. A strange energy pulsed in her hands, which lay clasped in her lap. After 7 years buried under a carefully constructed normalcy, an older self was stirring. On the table, a phone's dark screen became the room's sole focal point. After a long moment, she reached for it. Her thumb slid across the glass, gliding past the names Marcus knew, the neighbors, the book club, the circle of hollow friends. She scrolled beyond these shallow roots, deep into a directory untouched for 7 years, to an entry marked only with a V. A faint tremor betrayed her thumb as it paused above the name. A final checkpoint before the point of no return. She could still choose the life Marcus had outlined. The quiet divorce, the neat settlement, the small existence he assumed she wanted. She could remain the anonymous, forgettable Quinn, or she could execute another command entirely. Rain began to lash against the windows, a frantic drumming that echoed a past she had willed into silence. 7 years. For 7 years, she had been a whisper, a study in quiet safety. For 7 years, she pretended amnesia about the life before Marcus Hale. For 7 years, she had been a lie. She replayed his expression from earlier, the look not of hatred, which she could have borne, but of simple dismissal. It was the glance reserved for a task completed, an item crossed off a list. A 0. Her finger pressed down. The phone rang once, then twice. On the third ring, a voice answered, the deep, accented cadence unaltered by the years. "Ara," he said, a declaration, not a question. He always knew, even before technology announced a caller, even across an ocean of silence. "I wondered when you would make this call, Victor," she replied, her own voice a calm sea over a raging storm. "I have to come home." A dense pause hung in the air. "You never left, Princessa." "You only forgot where you were. I remember it now." "Good." She could hear the smile in his voice, a sharp, knowing sound. "I will send a vehicle. 1 hour. Victor, do not tell him. Not yet. Not until I have arrived." "Tell who?" She let her eyes fall shut. "Roman." The name filled the silence between them, a word with enough gravity to obliterate a man like Marcus Hale. Roman Vulov, her husband, her first, her only, the man she walked away from 7 years ago. She had traded an empire built on fear and loyalty for simple affection, a foolish bargain. "As you command," Victor said. But Ara, he never put his signature on the documents. Her eyes snapped open. "What?" "The papers for the divorce from 7 years ago. He did not sign them." "In the eyes of the law, and in every other way that counts, you remain his wife." The truth descended on her, a shroud of ice. She had imagined the break was absolute, a clean amputation of her past. But Roman Vulov never relinquished what was his. Never. 1 hour, she repeated, her voice firm. "The vehicle will be there." "Welcome home, Mrs. Vulov." The line went dead. Elena, in the growing dark, held the phone to her ear and allowed a small, sharp smile to touch her lips. It was not a smile of joy. It was the expression of an actress who, after years in a role, had nearly forgotten it was just a part. It was the smile of someone remembering who they truly are. Mrs. Vulov, never Mrs. Hale. She rose and walked to the bedroom she had shared with him. The closet was already half empty. Marcus had been moving his life out piece by piece, she realized, likely for weeks, into Victoria's home. Tucked behind her own modest clothes was a small, locked safe he'd never thought to ask about, assuming it held baubles or deeds. He was half right. She keyed in the code, her true date of birth, not the fabrication on her license, and the steel door swung open. Inside lay a passport, identification, a credit card, and a phone, all bearing her real name. Elena Vulov. Not Quinn. Elena. The name felt like a foreign word, and yet like her own reflection. Underneath the documents lay a single photograph, its edges softened by touch. She lifted it. There she was, younger, standing beside a man who commanded the frame even as a flat image. Roman Vulov, tall, dark, with eyes that drank the light and gave nothing back. His hand rested on her waist, a casual gesture of possession that spoke a single word, mine. She was 21 in the picture, he 32. She had been a student of international affairs, bright enough to be useful and foolish enough to believe she could survive in his orbit unscathed. In any room, he was the most lethal presence, directing ventures that spanned the globe, shifting millions of dollars and ending lives with the same cool indifference. Their meeting was at a university gala she was forced to attend, a scholarship case in a borrowed gown. She was an island of discomfort in a sea of Manhattan's elite. He was there to do what he always did, move through polite society like a shark, forging alliances and reminding everyone of the other world he commanded. "You look out of place," were the first words he spoke to her. "So do you," she had answered, too tired for courtesy, and he had laughed, a true, unguarded sound. Roman Vulov was seldom surprised. They were married 3 months later. 6 months after that, she began to grasp the nature of the force she had bound herself to. A year into their life together, she understood the price of his power, the perpetual shadow of danger, the blood that stained you even if you never saw it spilled. 2 years in, she ran, not from Roman himself. He was never cruel, never raised a hand, and in private treated her as his confidant while the world saw his prize. She fled the consequence of being his wife, the suffocating weight of it, the violence that clung to him like a second skin. She had told herself she wanted normalcy, a life of quiet safety. She chose Marcus because he was the absolute negation of Roman, predictable, with small, understandable ambitions. A man who wanted success but not power, money but not dominion. A man she could manage, a man who would never ask to see behind the mask. It had all been a pathetic charade. Elena placed the photo back inside and locked the safe. She packed with cold precision, choosing only what mattered. Not his gifts, not the clothes he'd bought, but the contents of the safe and a single item from her bedside table. It was a plain silver bracelet, a wedding gift from Roman. As she fastened it, headlights sliced through the dark of the bedroom. 1 hour. Victor was a man of his word. The vehicle waiting outside was not a car, but a declaration. Black, sleek, with windows tinted the color of obsidian, the kind of car that neighbors see and immediately force themselves to forget. A man stood beside the open rear door, younger than Victor, possessing the unnerving stillness of Roman's people, trained, lethal, unquestioning. Elena walked out of the house on Maple Street without a second glance, holding only a single bag. The rain had stopped, leaving the night air clean and the pavement gleaming under the streetlights. The man opened her door without a word. As she slid inside, it closed with the profound, final thud of a vault door. The air within smelled of expensive leather and gun oil, a scent that struck her with the force of memory. Victor sat across from her, older than she recalled, yet radiating the same polished menace that marked him as Roman's right hand. "You look well," he spoke in Russian. It had always been their language, a shield against outsiders like Marcus. "You haven't changed at all," she replied in kind, a gentle lie. His eyes searched her face. "Are you resolved? When this begins, Marcus Hale will finally grasp what he has lost. More than that, he will grasp his error. There will be no path back." "I am resolved." He paused. "He brought you pain." It wasn't a question, but she answered. "He discarded me, as if I was nothing, as if 7 years of my life were a minor problem he had finally solved." Victor's face did not move, but a flicker of ice appeared in his eyes. "Then he is about to learn the definition of nothing. His career, his name, his future with that Ashford girl. We should burn it to the ground." "No." Elena's reply was soft, yet unyielding. "Not quite yet. I have to see Roman first. He is going to want— I'm fully aware of what he wants. But the choice is mine, Victor. This is my play. Roman taught me control is power, and I'm deciding when and where to use it." A faint smile graced Victor's face. "So you haven't forgotten? Good. We were worried 7 years might have softened you." "I was never soft. I was in hiding, and my time in the shadows is over." The trip downtown consumed 40 minutes. Elena saw suburbs she knew bleed into those she didn't, the scenery shifting from domestic tranquility to urban authority. The car skirted Roman's public assets, the restaurants, lounges, and legitimate businesses that served as a front. It headed for a building in lower Manhattan, its exterior blending with the area's many luxury towers. But Elena knew this place. Its hidden network of security, the layers of defense that insulated its penthouse occupant. This was Roman's sanctuary, a place where he never had to perform. Entry to the elevator involved a 3-part verification, a biometric scan included, before it shot non-stop to the top floor. Victor stepped out first, an instinct from years as Roman's shadow, then gestured for Elena to enter. Nothing inside had been altered. Windows from floor to ceiling framed a sweeping vista of the city. The furniture, worth more than most cars, was arranged for function, not form, near art pieces museums would kill for. Centered in the room, with his back to them, stood Roman Vulov, gazing at New York's glowing grid. He made them wait, a familiar tactic to build tension and command the space. When he turned, the air caught in Elena's throat. Even after 7 years of mental preparation, he looked older, a change that only amplified his authority instead of weakening his presence. Fine new lines had etched themselves around his eyes. Strands of silver now wove through the dark hair at his temples. He was dressed in a suit that easily cost $10,000, cut so perfectly it seemed like a second skin. His eyes found hers across the expanse, and for a heartbeat, time froze. Then Roman's mouth curved into a smile, the kind worn by a man who has waited 7 years to collect on a sure bet. "Hello, Elena." Her real name, not Alara, was spoken with an inflection that was both a vow and a menace. "Hello, Roman." Victor vanished back into the elevator, leaving them alone as the doors whispered shut with the quiet hum of expensive machinery. "I was told about your husband," Roman said, crossing to a bar to pour 2 vodkas. The liquor was a rare bottle, not for public sale. "Ex-husband, I suppose, though you were never legally his. The contract of marriage implies certain freedoms you did not possess. You didn't sign the papers. I was never sent them." He handed her a glass, his fingers making deliberate contact with hers, a calculated touch. They were returned. "Your lawyer should have told you." "Oh, she did. I just assumed you'd refused." "I did, but only after making sure that news would never reach you. It was vital that you believed you were free." He lifted his glass. "To freedom then, and the moment one realizes it's an illusion." They both drank. The vodka seared her throat, a familiar burn. "Why?" she asked. "Why let me think I was divorced?" "Because you needed to believe an escape was possible. You had to feel that your new life was a genuine choice, a success." Roman set his glass down, his eyes holding hers. "If I had forced you to remain, you would have resented me. I needed you to come back on your own terms, understanding exactly where you belong." "That's manipulation." "It is. The alternative was telling you the truth, which would have voided 7 years of very expensive patience. No." He closed the space between them, his cologne filling the air until she could see the precise shade of his eyes. They weren't black, she remembered now, but the darkest brown imaginable. "I was always certain you would come back, Elena. I knew that, given enough time, you would remember who you really are. The only unknown was when." "You sound awfully sure of yourself." "My confidence comes from knowing you better than Marcus Hale ever could, and sometimes better than you know yourself." His hand came up, fingers tracing the line of her jaw with a softness that defied his character. "You tried to live a normal life. You gave it a real effort, but the part was never written for someone of your scale." Elena shut her eyes, fighting the potent, familiar pull he had on her. "He said I made him look small, that I wasn't enough for his new world. Roman's hand stopped moving. When her eyes opened again, his face was a mask of cold fury. He said that and more. Victor mentioned he hurt you. I wasn't aware he was also foolish enough to insult you. What does it matter? It's over. I left. It matters. Roman's voice was a low growl, more threatening than any shout. Because nobody speaks to my wife that way. Nobody cheapens what belongs to me. Nobody. He took a step back, his ironclad control snapping back into place. Makes you feel less than what you are. I'm not yours anymore, Roman. I made the choice to leave. And yet, here you are in my penthouse with my bracelet on your wrist, drinking my vodka. His smile was sharp enough to draw blood. You can lie to yourself, Princessa, but you will not lie to me. You're here because you've finally admitted the truth. And what truth is that? That you were never meant for small men with small ambitions. That a simple life, a simple love, and simple dreams don't fit you. They never did. He walked to the window, surveying the city sprawled beneath them like a conquered kingdom. This is where you belong. With me. In this world. You always have. Elena moved to stand beside him, close enough to feel the heat from his body without touching. Below, millions of lives pulsed, each chasing their own conventional dreams. She had fought so hard to be one of them. So what happens now? She asked. That depends entirely on what you want. She saw Marcus's face, probably with Victoria, toasting his freedom from a burdensome marriage. She remembered the look he gave her, like a problem that had been solved. She thought of 7 years spent making herself smaller, quieter, less. I want him to understand, she finally said. I want Marcus Hale to look at me and know exactly what he threw away. Vengeance, then, a lesson. She turned to Roman. I want him to learn what it costs to underestimate someone, to treat them like they're disposable. Roman's smile spread slowly, filled with satisfaction, utterly predatory. I can arrange that. Be warned, however, this path has no mercy. Marcus Hale's life as he knows it will be systematically unmade. His social standing, his career, his future with that Ashford woman, all of it will turn to ash. And everyone will know why. Everyone will know he was married to Elena Volkov and was too stupid to realize what that meant. Good. Are you sure? This stops being about him. This becomes about you taking back your place, your real place, with me, as my wife, my partner, my equal. No more running, no more hiding. Elena saw her reflection in the glass, superimposed over the city's lights. For 7 years, that reflection had been Alara Quinn, soft, kind, unremarkable. But standing here in Roman's home, with his bracelet and his liquor, she saw another woman. She saw Elena Volkov, who she was before, who she fought to bury, who was always there underneath. I'm sure, she confirmed. Roman's hand closed over hers, their fingers lacing together with a familiar comfort. In that case, welcome home, my love. It's time to reintroduce you to the world. Outside, the rain began again, but inside, Elena felt a warmth that had been absent for 7 years. It wasn't the steady, low flame of her life with Marcus, a heat that never truly banished the cold. This was something else entirely. This was the heat of a gathering inferno, building power, poised to burn down everything. Marcus Hale had made a mistake of epic, life-ending proportions. He had cast off a woman he saw as weak, plain, and harmless. In truth, he had just betrayed the wife of New York's most feared man. He was about to learn the difference. The first morning back felt like waking up in a body she had forgotten. Elena was in the penthouse bathroom, correcting her own thought, examining her reflection with a detached eye. The same features, the same skin, the same woman who had been chopping vegetables in a small kitchen just 24 hours ago. And yet, a deep realignment had taken place, like a bone snapping cleanly back into its socket. Roman appeared in the doorway behind her, dressed in a charcoal suit that cost more than Marcus earned in a month. He caught her eye in the mirror. "You didn't sleep," he observed. "Neither did you." "I rarely do." He came closer, fastening his cufflinks with practiced ease. "Victor is ready. There are things that must be done immediately. You wanted Marcus to understand what he lost. That requires a stage to be set." Roman's hand came to rest on her shoulder, its warmth seeping through the silk of the robe she'd borrowed. "Unless you've changed your mind." Elena saw Marcus handing her divorce papers on their anniversary and heard the casual cruelty in his voice when he called her ordinary. She reflected on the 7 years she had whittled herself down to fit his idea of a perfect wife. "My resolve is unchanged." "Good. Then prepare. The day's agenda is full." An hour later, Elena sat in what Roman called his office, though it was a nerve center of glass and data. 3 walls offered a panorama of Manhattan. The 4th was a wall of screens alive with information she was only now deciphering. Victor stood by one monitor, tablet in hand, like a scholar about to deliver a eulogy for a man still breathing. "Marcus Anthony Hale," Victor began, his accented English crisp and surgical. 34 years of age, senior associate at Whitmore and Chen, with partnership anticipated in the next 6 months. He possesses a bachelor's from Cornell and a law degree from Columbia. The subject now resides at 2847 Park Avenue, Suite 14C. Victoria's apartment, Elena breathed. The barest trace of a smile touched Victor's lips. "Correct, he took up residence there 3 weeks ago, while still legally bound to you in marriage." Roman sank deeper into his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin like a silent judge. "Continue. His net worth is calculated at $340,000, mostly non-liquid, vested in retirement and investment accounts with Ashford Financial Group. He drives a leased BMW, cultivates an image with suits he cannot afford, and carries a 30% spending deficit to sustain the illusion." Victor switched to another glowing display. "His promotion to partner is entirely dependent on acquiring the Ashford family as a permanent client. Victoria's father, Richard Ashford, governs a commercial real estate empire valued at nearly $800 million. "So it was never just about Victoria," Elena stated, the words hollow. "He is using her to get to her father's fortune." "Precisely. A partnership at Whitmore and Chen is not earned by merit alone. It demands the acquisition of a monumental new client. Marcus has been positioning himself to become the lead counsel for the Ashford family's East Coast interests." Roman's expression was a placid mask, but Elena recognized the intense stillness, the mind behind it, running countless simulations like a grandmaster contemplating a board where the pieces were human lives. "And what is Victoria's part in this?" Elena asked. Victor summoned another profile onto the screen. The screen held a polished headshot of a woman in her late 20s, a blonde with the sculpted, manufactured perfection, impeccable bone structure, flawless dental work, and a confidence born from a life that had never known denial. Victoria Ashford looked like a creature conditioned by a gilded cage, where the world existed only for her convenience. Victoria Constance Ashford, 28, an MBA from Wharton, currently Vice President of Acquisitions at Ashford Financial, a position manufactured for her. Victor's tone was flawlessly neutral, but Elena could feel the cold dissection beneath it. Her intelligence is sufficient, but she is prone to overestimating her own abilities, a weakness her father indulges. The mother numbs herself with spirits. The brother. Elena cut in. Wait. There's a brother. Christopher Ashford, 32, the heir apparent to the Ashford fortune, who manages their West Coast operations from San Francisco. All available intelligence points to him as the competent one. Victoria is the decorative piece, displayed at charity events and company dinners. The information settled within Elena, and the tragic architecture of their motivations became clear. So Victoria's need for Marcus is the same as his for her. She wants legitimacy. A husband with his own career makes her seem like more than just an ornament. Excellent, Roman murmured. Your insight into the mechanics of power has always been sharp. I learned from the master. Elena's focus returned to Victor. Is there more? Marcus has kept a very quiet front. No public filing for divorce has been made. No trace of Victoria on his social media. He is sidestepping any move that might compromise his image as a dependable, upstanding man. He's waiting until the marriage is dissolved and a respectable amount of time has passed to avoid appearing like an opportunist. So meticulously planned. And yet his attorney filed the initial papers yesterday. An uncontested divorce citing irreconcilable differences. The proposal includes the residence we spoke of and a payment of $50,000. The number was cold, disdainful insult. 7 years of her life assessed at less than the value of his car. A muscle tightened in Roman's jaw. A generous proposal. I don't want his money, Elena said, her voice devoid of emotion. Of course not. You have your own. Roman gestured to Victor, who conjured another financial statement on the screen. The numbers made Elena's breath catch. The trust I established for you 7 years ago has grown steadily. Its present value is roughly $12 million, conservatively invested to produce around $400,000 in passive income annually. Elena stared at the digits. I never knew. You never asked, but I would not permit you to be vulnerable, Elena. Whatever our situation, you were still my wife, and thus my responsibility. Roman's voice became almost imperceptibly softer. Still his property. The possessiveness had once felt like a cage. 7 years ago, it meant she was another piece in Roman's carefully arranged collection of assets. Now, seeing the proof of his silent protection long after she had gone, the feeling was different. It wasn't gratitude, but something far more tangled. So, what's the plan? She asked, pushing the turmoil aside. Roman and Victor shared a look Elena knew well. The design was complete. They were only waiting for her command. We will dismantle him, Roman said with chilling simplicity. We do it methodically, systematically, through a series of what will appear to be unfortunate events and his own poor judgment, not direct assault. We begin with his professional world, move to his personal connections, and we finish with his future itself. When we are done, Marcus Hale will understand with perfect clarity the true worth of what he had and what he has thrown away. That sounds like it will take time. Weeks, actually. Victor has already initiated the first steps. Elena glanced at Victor, who offered a sliver of professional humility. You were certain I would want this then. I was certain you would want a correction of his behavior, Victor clarified. Vengeance is messy. This is merely a recalibration. Marcus Hale operated with incomplete information. We are providing him with the full picture. Elena almost smiled at that. Victor's gift was framing total annihilation as an educational seminar. "Show me the process," she commanded. Roman rose, crossing to the windows with the fluid, deliberate grace of a stalking predator. Whitmore and Chen is a second-tier firm with delusions of grandeur. They aspire to break into the top 20 law firms in New York. Marcus's partnership hinges on two things: his billable hours and his ability to bring in new clients. He is adequate at the first, and he has gambled his entire future on the second. The Ashford account. Exactly. But that account is far less secure than he could possibly imagine. Richard Ashford is a relic of old money struggling to survive in a new world. He is over-leveraged, prone to bad decisions, and is propping up his failing ventures with increasingly creative accounting. His company is valued on paper at $800 million, but its actual liquid worth is a fraction of that. Victor brought up financials that were clearly not for public eyes. Ashford Financial is about 18 months away from a catastrophic fiscal collapse. They are overextended across multiple properties, dependent on long-term projects, and bleeding cash from buildings that sit half empty. How do you have this information? Roman's smile was a blade. Because I own the territories where 3 of those developments are located. I have been charting Richard Ashford's slow decay for months, waiting for the moment his desperation would force a fatal mistake. Now we will simply accelerate his timetable, apply pressure to the weak points, and reveal his vulnerabilities to interested parties. Roman returned to his chair, resting his elbows on the desk. Richard Ashford needs to be rescued. I will offer him that rescue, but my terms will not include his daughter's lover serving as his chief legal counsel. Elena processed the cold brilliance of the strategy. You're going to save his company. I'm going to acquire a controlling interest in his company. Enough to secure seats on the board. Enough to determine which law firms they do business with. Roman's eyes locked with hers. And our new policy will not include keeping Whitmore and Chen. This move effectively ends Marcus's chances at a partnership. That is the point. And what is the plan for Victoria? Victor took the question. Victoria is a problem that will resolve itself. Once Marcus is stripped of his value as the Ashford family's lawyer, he is reduced to a moderately successful attorney dating the boss's daughter. Richard Ashford accepts him now because he is useful. Without that utility, he is just another man paying for his daughter's lifestyle. Exactly. Richard Ashford is a traditionalist. He expects his daughter to marry into old money to secure a powerful name, preferably someone from his own world. To Roman, Marcus Hale was new money at his most generous appraisal. In reality, he was an unsecured commodity, a brief arrangement tolerated solely for the strategic leverage he offered. As Roman laid out the scenario with that leverage gone, Richard's paternal skepticism would sharpen. He'd dissect Marcus's origins, his drive, his endgame, then weigh him against Victoria's other prospects, men of old money and dynastic power. And Victoria, Elena interjected, is her interest in Marcus genuine, or is he just another pawn for her? In response, Victor illuminated his tablet, displaying a series of messages. The raw intelligence, he said. Elena leaned in, her eyes scanning the text between Victoria and a contact labeled Jennifer, her confidant. The message timestamp was from 2 days ago, the same day Marcus had served Elena the divorce papers. Jennifer. The domestic trial run? How goes it? Victoria. Bearable. Marcus has fewer complexities than I foresaw. He's grateful, you could say. Jennifer. Grateful is a good sign, LOL. Better than entitled. Victoria. Indeed. He shows appreciation for small gestures. It's almost quaint. A world away from the trust fund heirs my father prefers. Jennifer. You actually like him? Victoria. I like that he built himself from nothing. It reflects well on me, makes me seem less superficial by proxy. He's also easy on the eyes and navigates social events with competence. Jennifer. So romantic? AF. Victoria. Don't be ridiculous. I don't do romance. I do strategy. Marcus was a moving part in her 5-year plan, a human asset. Her clinical dispassion was stark. The plan itself was adaptable, hinging entirely on his performance. If he made partner and landed key accounts, she would consider keeping him. If not, replacements were already vetted. A strange sense of vindication settled over Elena. It was a relationship of pure utility, with no emotional ties. Two predators circling each other, both believing they held the leash. She has the same pathology, Elena murmured. Roman nodded. Which means the extraction will be clean. Neither party has a true emotional stake. They are invested only in what the other represents. Take that away, and the entire structure implodes. When do we move? Elena asked. Victor initiated phase 1 yesterday. Today we escalate. Roman glanced at his watch. A Patek Philippe, whose understated elegance was worth more than a luxury car. In roughly 2 hours, I have a meeting with Richard Ashford. He remains ignorant that I am about to make a hostile offer for his entire corporation. His only rational move is to accept. The man is in financial ruin, and my proposition is his sole lifeline. He'll have to swallow his pride to survive. Victor darkened his tablet screen. While Roman corners Ashford, our purpose is different. Which is the tactical reintroduction of Elena Volkov into the world she left behind. Your 7-year hiatus has allowed memories to fade. It's time for a reawakening. The thought sent a jolt through Elena, not of fear, but of a sharp, nervous energy. For 7 years, she had cultivated absolute obscurity. The identity of Quinn, the quiet wife of Marcus Hale, was a cloak of invisibility. To become Elena Volkov again meant inviting the glare of the spotlight, the risk, the power, the immense psychological weight. I'm not fully conditioned, she admitted. Roman stood, moved around the desk, and knelt before her. The rare gesture of submission, bringing his eyes level with hers, was a strategic intimacy that slipped past her guard, hitting her with more force than any of his prior claims of ownership. Your readiness never left you, he said, his voice low as his hands enveloped hers. It was there when we first met. It was there when you walked away. It's always been there, merely dormant. All we are doing is correcting its aim. What are the odds I fail? 0. You can't know that. My certainty comes from knowing you. I watched you cage a brilliant mind for 7 years, a discipline that only made you sharper. Marcus Hale tried to break you, and yet here you are, whole. His grip tightened almost imperceptibly. You are not the woman who made a deal with me, Elena. You are more, wiser, harder. And now you're fueled by a cold anger which makes you dangerous. I have no desire to be dangerous. I know. That's what makes it perfect. He rose, pulling her up with him. Victor is right. We have work to do, starting with your appearance. What's wrong with my appearance? A look passed between Roman and Victor, one that could have been funny in another life. The Quinn identity required a practical wardrobe, Victor said with immense tact. The Elena Volkov identity demands a new visual language. 3 hours later, Elena understood. The establishment Victor brought her to had no sign, no address, and catered to women who never looked at a price tag. The owner, a formidable woman named Anastasia, gave Elena a single sweeping glance and began pulling pieces with the precision of a surgeon. "No," Anastasia said, her voice like ice, as Elena's hand drifted toward a navy dress that echoed her life with Marcus. "That is for women who want to blend in. Your time of blending in is over." She held up a gown of emerald silk that cost more than Elena's grocery budget for a year. It fit perfectly, a second skin that hinted at the body beneath without revealing it. The dress conveyed authority without arrogance, sensuality without softness. "An improvement," Anastasia stated. "Now you look like someone worth watching." For another 2 hours, they built what the woman called a foundational wardrobe. Gowns, suits, and separates in colors that made Elena's features ignite. The cuts celebrated her form. The fabrics whispered of wealth, not gaudiness. It wasn't about fashion, it was about forging armor for the psyche. From a chair in the corner, Victor watched the transformation, giving slight nods or murmuring suggestions. When Anastasia finally announced it was done, he stood and passed her a black card without a word. "Deliver everything to the penthouse," he instructed. "And Anastasia, the usual discretion." "Of course, Victor Mikhailovich. It is always a pleasure to arm a powerful woman." In the car, Elena watched Victor's reflection against the blur of city lights. How long was this plan in place? What plan? Don't play coy. That shop being free on a moment's notice, the owner knowing my exact needs without a single question, the clothes fitting perfectly with no alterations. This was prepared in advance. Victor offered a rare, small smile. Roman and I planned for many possibilities. This was simply one of them. "You really expected me to come back?" "We hoped," he corrected. "There's a difference." He turned to her, his expression serious. "Elena, you must grasp this. These 7 years were not easy for Roman. Patience is not his nature. The self-control it took for him to wait was immense, but he never wavered. He never looked for a replacement. He never stopped believing you would eventually come back online. That shows an incredible faith in a person who abandoned him." "No," Victor countered softly. "It shows an incredible understanding of why you left and of what it would take for you to return. You ran because you feared what this world would make of you. You are coming back because you've learned that running from power doesn't keep you safe. It only makes you a target. That is psychological growth. Roman sees it." Elena watched the city slide by. "What if I can't do this? What if I'm not who you think I am?" "Then you fail, we adjust." "But you won't fail, Elena. I've had eyes on you for 7 years. Yes, we watched. You never lost your intellect, your strategy, your ability to see the patterns no one else did. You were just aiming those gifts at becoming invisible rather than influential. Now you are just re-aiming." The car slid to a stop before a sleek, modern tower Elena didn't know, guarded by men with military-grade gear. "Where are we?" "Your new headquarters, one of them. Roman knew you would need your own space, apart from his, a place where you could operate without ever feeling like his subordinate." Victor led her past a security team that was expecting them and into a private elevator that scanned her biometrics. The office on the 32nd floor overlooked Central Park, a space where every object was a masterpiece of form and function. "Operate on what?" Elena asked, her fingers grazing a desk that cost more than her last car. "The field of play is yours to choose. Roman's world is vast, Elena. There is no corner of it that could not use a mind like yours." Victor handed her a tablet, its screen illuminating a litany of ventures poised for direct intervention. Real estate empires, legitimate investment fronts, charitable foundations seeking new vision. Pick your battleground, or invent one. The goal is to carve out your own sphere of influence. Elena scrolled through the dossiers, each a universe of millions of dollars and critical junctures. A year ago, the sheer volume of data would have paralyzed her. Now she saw only leverage, angles, and the architecture of power. "This one," she said, her finger tapping a file named the Meridian Arts Foundation. "What of it? A bleeding nonprofit devoted to arts education for the forgotten. Its soul is righteous, but its body is broken, hemorrhaging funds. Roman caught it 6 months back to stave off collapse, its fate still undecided. I want it." Victor's brow lifted slightly. "It is a nest of corruption, embezzled funds, programs in disarray, and a board chasing tax shelters instead of its charter. To salvage it will be a monumental task." "Good. I need a purpose, something not forged in greed, power, or the settling of scores." Elena set the tablet aside. "If I am to walk back into this life, it will be on my terms. That means wielding my power for an end beyond the destruction of Marcus Hale." For the first time she could recall, Victor seemed genuinely impressed. "Roman will grant it. He's always believed that power without purpose is just cruelty with a budget. Make the arrangements. I want total ownership of the foundation, complete authority over its operations. I will rebuild it, streamline its purpose, and make it an entity that earns its patronage. Understood. The transfer documents will be drawn up by morning." Victor glanced at his own device. "Roman's business with Ashford is likely concluded. We should go. He will need your report on the outcome." The drive back to the penthouse was fundamentally altered from the journey out. Elena now saw the city not as a hiding place, but as a kingdom she was beginning to conquer. Each building, every street, the entire constructed illusion of order was an extension of Roman's will. And now, it was an extension of hers. He was there, waiting in his usual chair with a scotch, his expression confirming the meeting had gone precisely to plan. "So," she said, taking the seat across from him, "I am now Richard Ashford's associate. I acquired 40% of Ashford Financial for $320 million, which includes oversight of their legal and finance teams." Roman's smile was one of deep, almost lazy satisfaction. His approval was a tangible force in the room, and Marcus's name was left unspoken. Richard said his name once, praising some recent work. I feigned mild interest and suggested new counsel might be needed for larger ventures ahead. Boutique firms, I suggested, with deeper expertise. Roman let the ice swirl in his glass. I named 3 of their competitors, each more powerful and prestigious than Whitmore and Chen. You should have seen his face. The implication that Marcus was now obsolete landed instantly. Precisely. Richard is already reconsidering his allegiances. I saw the calculation in his eyes as he realized Marcus was now a liability, that my investment required a higher caliber of operator. Marcus will be phased out, probably in a matter of weeks. The dismissal will be clinical, polite, and absolute. Victor, seated nearby, tapped at his tablet. I have already seeded anonymous concerns with the partnership at Whitmore and Chen. Vague inquiries, he explained, about Marcus's methods for landing clients. hints that the Ashford account is not as secure as he claims. An internal review will commence, forcing him to defend a position he no longer truly holds. Elena watched them, this seamless machine of cause and effect, Roman and Victor operating with the devastating harmony of a lifetime pact. This was the world engine she had renounced, not merely Roman, but the entire architecture of influence he commanded. A part of her recoiled, another felt like it had finally come home. "When will Marcus realize what's happening?" she asked. "It is impossible to say for certain. Next week, maybe, when Richard's calls are not returned, or meetings get cancelled. Sooner, if he is sensitive to the subtle shifts in the atmosphere around him." Roman set his glass down. "But the real moment of epiphany will be saved, reserved for when he sees you again and connects the dots." "And where will that be?" "Ah, the Garrison Charity Gala in 3 weeks. Everyone who matters will be there, including Richard and Victoria Ashford. And almost certainly Marcus, clinging to the remnants of that connection." Roman's gaze was sharp. "And so will we, Mr. and Mrs. Vulov, attending their first public function together in 7 years. Indeed. The idea sent a jolt of electricity through Elena. 3 weeks to prepare. 3 weeks to build a self that could own that room. 3 weeks to shed Ara Quinn and become Elena Vulov so completely that no one could ever question which one was the truth. "I'll need more than a new wardrobe," she said, her voice low. "I know, which is why you have 3 weeks. Roman stood and offered her his hand. "We will start with dinner. The real work begins at dawn." Victor has already assembled the team: lawyers, public image consultants, and security specialists who sculpt public lives. You will be ready when you walk into that gala. Elena took his hand, letting him draw her to her feet. "And if I am not, we will improvise. It is what we do." Roman's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, a gesture so familiar it ached. "But you will be, Elena, because you're not alone in this. Not anymore." That night, long after dinner and the strategy session had ended, after Victor was gone, Elena stood in the bathroom, brushing her teeth, her mind fixed on Marcus. She pictured him now, probably at Victoria's home, celebrating his divorce, convinced he had played his hand brilliantly. He was entirely blind to the storm gathering on his horizon, utterly unaware that the world he was building was already being unmade, that the plain woman he had so easily discarded was now designing his ruin with a precision he could never imagine. Roman appeared behind her in the mirror, ready for bed. "Your thoughts are deafening. I was just wondering if this is too much. Is that a genuine question, or are you testing me to see if I will let you back out?" Elena's eyes met his in the reflection. "A little of both, perhaps. Then let me be perfectly clear. What we are doing to Marcus Hale is measured. It is proportionate. And frankly, it is less than he deserves for what he did to you. We are not destroying his life. We are simply removing the unearned leverage he intended to use against you. He will survive. He just won't thrive on your ruin." Roman's hands settled on her shoulders. "If you want this to stop, it stops. But do not mistake my compassion for weakness, Elena. Marcus showed you who he was. All we are doing is making sure the rest of the world sees it too." She turned to face him, so close she could feel the warmth of his breath. "I am not yet comfortable in this skin. I know. But you will be." He placed a kiss on her forehead, an act of impossible gentleness from a man of his nature. "Come to bed. Tomorrow we begin to arm you for the war. Tonight there is only sleep. but sleep was a distant country. Elena lay awake long after Roman's breathing evened out, staring into the darkness, thinking of the woman she was, the woman she tried to be, and the woman she was becoming. None of them fit. None of them felt entirely true. Maybe that was the point. Maybe she was never supposed to be just one thing, not Ara, not Elena, not the quiet wife or the avenging queen. Perhaps her truth was in the liminal space between, navigating the cross currents of love and power, where weakness and strength held each other in a fragile truce. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number. Papers for the dissolution of your marriage will be filed tomorrow. Please confirm you have received the settlement offer. J. Morrison, Esquire. It was Marcus's lawyer, no doubt following protocol, making sure the record was clean. Elena deleted the message unanswered. Let them wonder. Let Marcus feel the first cold whisper of unease, the first hint that this ending would not be written on his terms. The game was afoot, and this time Elena knew all the rules. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in controlled chaos, reminding Elena of everything she had fled from this life, and everything perversely she had missed. The transformation was not sudden. It was built piece by piece in subtle calibrations and engineered encounters, in learning to walk as if the world was meant to part for her. Anastasia had been right. Clothes were armor. But Elena quickly learned she required more than fabric and thread. She needed a posture, a carriage, the unique gravity that comes from inhabiting oneself without apology. Your shoulders, the consultant, a woman named Margaret with eyes like chips of ice, who claimed to have trained royals, said for the 15th time that morning. You're still holding them as if you wish to disappear. Stop! Elena's spine straightened, awakening muscles that had coiled inward for 7 years. Better. Now walk across this room as if it were yours. It is not. It is Roman's, which makes it yours. Move. She moved through the office, a hyper-awareness in every stride. The motion felt staged, a hollow pantomime of someone else's life. You are still thinking, Margaret observed. Each gesture is a calculation. Let it go. Just walk. You knew how to do this once. That was a lifetime ago. The body remembers. Your flesh holds the knowledge. Your mind must learn to be silent. Margaret rose, a study in effortless grace born from decades of practice. Watch me. I am not thinking of my feet, my carriage, or how I appear. My mind is fixed on where I am going and my right to be there. All else follows. Elena tried again, focusing on the destination instead of the journey. The feeling was marginally less alien. An improvement, Margaret allowed. We will resume tomorrow. For now, your dialect coach is here. The tutor was almost superfluous. Elena's Russian had stayed sharp through the lost years. She had whispered it to herself in the dark when Marcus was away, simply to keep the pathways of her mind alive. But Victor had insisted, stating they needed to sand the edges from her accent for formal settings. You sound like a Muscovite, her coach Dmitri noted in flawless Russian. It is fine for the street, but in the circles you are about to enter, there are invisible tells. Old money versus new, St. Petersburg versus Moscow. These things matter deeply to the people who notice. And Roman wants me to sound like St. Petersburg's old money. Roman wants you to sound like an elevated version of yourself. There is a difference. Dmitri tilted his head, studying her. Tell me, when you first met Roman, how did you speak? Elena saw it then. The charity ball, a girl on scholarship in a borrowed dress, drowning in a sea of wealth and trying not to show it. I spoke with extreme caution, she admitted. I was terrified. I am still terrified, just better at hiding it. Dmitri nodded. A working foundation, he said. The fear is not the issue, Elena. It is how it presents. We will reforge your fear into command. For 2 hours, they worked on resonance and the microscopic cues that separate doubt from absolute will. Elena left the session exhausted but strangely alive, dormant parts of her psyche firing anew. Victor was waiting as she exited, his gaze locked on a phone, radiating the quiet intensity of a man juggling multiple wars. He asked how it went without looking up. I feel like I'm back in school. In a way you are. This is your graduate work in the art of being Elena Vulov. He pocketed the phone. Are you ready for the real lesson? That was not it. That was the overture. Now we deal with the institution. The Meridian Arts Foundation occupied 3 floors of a Brooklyn building that might have been beautiful once, but now just seemed weary. The lobby smelled of stale coffee and quiet desperation. A young receptionist who looked fresh out of college offered a distracted glance. Can I help you? Elena Vulov, for the board, Victor said, his tone professionally smooth. We have an appointment. The woman's eyes widened at the name, and a small, hot spark of satisfaction ignited in Elena's chest. So the name had arrived before she did. Good. 7 people were in the 3rd floor conference room. All stood when Elena and Victor walked in. They ranged from late 40s to early 70s, dressed in the careful uniform of nonprofit leadership. Expensive enough to signal competence, but not so expensive as to suggest waste. Mrs. Volkov, a man in his 60s, extended a hand. David Chen, chairman of the board. An honor. Elena met his grip with perfectly metered pressure, a direct application of Margaret's lesson. Thank you for your time. I know this was scheduled on short notice. It is no trouble. When we heard you were taking direct oversight, he trailed off, gesturing to the table. Please, we are eager to hear your vision. Elena took the chair at the head of the table, an immediate seizure of physical and symbolic power as Victor had coached. For the next 10 minutes, she laid out her audit of the foundation's failings and the blueprint for its repair. The mission is noble, she began, projecting financials onto the screen. Arts education for underserved youth is vital, but your execution is fractured. You do too much with too little, bleeding impact across competing programs that cannibalize the same pool of funds. David shifted uncomfortably. We wanted to serve as many children as possible. A worthy sentiment, but serving many poorly is not better than serving a few exceptionally well. Look at the numbers. Elena gestured to the screen. 3 separate music programs in 3 different boroughs, each with its own budget, its own space, its own staff. They are systematically undermining one another's existence and potential. A woman at the far end, Caroline, whose file Elena had memorized, spoke up. We felt a citywide presence was important. Presence without results is just expensive advertising. Elena clicked to the next slide. Here is my proposal. We merged the music programs into one flagship initiative with shared assets. We do the same for visual arts and for theater. We cut the administrative fat. We pour that saved capital back into the programs and the instructors. We will do 3 things with absolute excellence instead of 10 things with mediocrity. A heavy silence filled the room. David finally spoke, choosing his words carefully. This is a radical restructuring. Some board members have deep emotional ties to these programs. I understand change is hard, but sentiment does not pay the bills or educate children. Elena met his gaze and held it. This foundation has been running on fumes and goodwill. You've had 2 rounds of layoffs this year alone. You are about 90 days from a third that will render you inert. We can continue on that path to oblivion, or we can make the hard choices now and build something that lasts. Caroline's defensiveness had melted into something like consideration. What is your timeline? Full implementation in 6 months, with the first consolidations happening within 90 days. Elena brought up a detailed calendar she and Victor had built. And I will be here for the duration. This isn't a hostile takeover where I give orders from afar. I will be on the ground with your people, managing this and owning the outcome. That is more hands-on than we expected, David admitted. Good. You should expect it. This is not a line item in my portfolio. If my name is on this foundation, it will function flawlessly. Elena leaned forward, her voice dropping. I am not here to make you feel comfortable. I am here to make this work. If you cannot get behind that, now is the time to say so. She could feel Victor's silent approval from the side of the room. She had struck the perfect note of pragmatic brutality. The board members traded looks, a silent, tense negotiation. At last, David gave a short, sharp nod. We appreciate your directness, Mrs. Volkov, and your commitment. I think I speak for the entire board when I say we are ready to seriously consider your proposal. Excellent. You have until Friday to make a final decision. After that, I need a firm commitment, or my capital goes elsewhere. Elena stood, signaling the meeting's end. Victor will send the full strategic plan. Read it, come prepared with questions. The board filed out, leaving Elena alone with Victor. She held her breath until the door clicked shut, then let it out in a long, shuddering sigh. My performance? You were terrifying. It was perfect. Victor gathered their materials. David will call with their full capitulation by tomorrow. They need you too much to say no, and you just showed them the decisive leadership they've been praying for. It feels like I just strong-armed a room full of people who want to help kids. You gave them a lifeline and a strategy. There is a difference. Victor's face softened almost imperceptibly. Elena, you were superb, more than superb. You walked in as their benefactor and you walked out as their commander. That is no easy thing. Elena sank into her chair, the weight of the last hour crashing down on her. Is it always this draining to lead? Yes, but it gets easier to bear. The first seizure of power is always the hardest. You're fighting yourself as much as you're fighting them. He glanced at his watch. We should leave. Roman is waiting for us for dinner, and you have a fitting right after. For the gala. Anastasia has finished the gown. The dress Elena saw that evening stole her breath. A silk of deep midnight that swallowed the light, appearing black in the shadows. Its neckline spoke of power, not invitation, with a back cut low like a whispered dare. It clung to her frame as if spun from her own skin. This is too much, Elena breathed, staring at her reflection. It is exactly what is required, Anastasia corrected, her fingers smoothing the fabric. You are not walking into that gala to be ignored. You are going to remind them that Elena Vulov was never gone, merely waiting. This dress announces that. It makes you look formidable, dangerous, and beautiful, everything you already are. Anastasia stepped back, admiring her work. When Marcus Hale sees you in this, he will realize he never saw you at all. That single searing image Marcus's face in that moment had haunted Elena's thoughts for days. She had played it out 100 times, trying to script his reaction to brace for any outcome. But in this dress, she knew no rehearsal could capture this reality. This was more than retribution now. It was the reclamation of a soul. The week that followed was a different sort of test. Roman required her presence at his dinners, shadowy meetings where deals were struck and loyalties cemented in quiet rooms. No grand reveal, just a quiet, constant presence, a reminder to his circle that his wife was home. The first dinner was in a restaurant where menus were devoid of prices, a warning sign from Elena's past life. Their guests were the Dmitrievs, an older couple handling shipping logistics out of New Jersey. Victor's brief had been succinct. Old allies, powerful but quiet, deeply traditional. Over appetizers, Mrs. Dimitri's gaze drilled into Elena. "You are the one who left." Elena felt Roman's body go rigid beside her, but kept her own face a placid mask. "I am. And now you are back. I am. Why?" The question was a blade. The woman she once was would have flinched, but Elena Vulov now met steel with steel. "Because leaving was a mistake. I thought I wanted something else, and discovered I only wanted what I already had." Her gaze held Mrs. Dimitri's, unblinking. "And because Roman was patient enough to let me learn that for myself." Mrs. Dimitri's face remained a stone carving, but something in her eyes shifted, a flicker of respect, honesty. "Good." I worried he had found a woman who only echoes his own thoughts. I have never been good at that. "Also good." She then turned to Roman. "She is sharper than I remember, less afraid." "She has had time to build her own foundation," Roman said, his hand closing over Elena's beneath the table's cloth. After that, the tension in the room dissipated. The conversation flowed from business to personal history, the easy cadence of old associates. Elena spoke only when necessary, watching Roman command the space. A perfect illusion of ease that hid a constantly turning mind. In the car, silence stretched between them until the penthouse loomed. "Your handling of Arena was adequate," he finally said, "a necessary test." "Of course, first meetings always are. They need to know if you are back to stay or just passing through." He cut the engine in the garage, the sudden quiet heavy, but he did not move to get out. "For what it's worth, you passed. Arena's approval is not easily won. I know what failure would have looked like. Not a clean break, but a slow decay of influence fed by whispers and doubts. The kind of quiet death that destroys power without a fight." Roman turned toward her in the dim light. "This world we live in is built half on reality, half on perception. They have to believe you are strong before they will let you use that strength. Tonight, you gave them a reason to believe." Elena absorbed this, thinking of the endless performances required to exist in his world. Does the constant judgment, the endless audition not wear on the soul? But the alternative, to be invisible, to be dismissed, was a far worse fate. You know this now. He was right, and they both knew it. Elena had lived 7 years of invisibility, a life that gave her nothing but the brutal lesson that her insignificance was the only thing Marcus had ever loved about her. A week later, Victor delivered news with a satisfaction he barely concealed. Marcus had been called into a meeting with the senior partners at his firm. The Ashford account was now under a strategic review. His hours were audited. Questions were being asked about his methods. "He is trying to reach Richard Ashford," Victor said, reading from a screen of illegally intercepted messages. 4 calls today, none returned. 2 emails answered by polite deflections from Richard's assistant. His anxiety is climbing. Excellent, Roman said, his eyes still on a tablet. Let him panic. It compromises a man's thinking. Across the office, Elena felt a strange conflict in her chest, the sharp tang of victory mixed with a primal dread. What happens when he realizes Victoria's father is cutting him out? He will grow desperate, make mistakes, and accelerate his own ruin, Roman answered, finally looking up. Are you feeling conflicted? No. Just wondering how much pleasure we should take in this. I take no pleasure in it, Roman stated, his voice flat and clinical. I am delivering a consequence to someone who harmed my wife. It is a simple transaction devoid of emotion for me. But for Elena, it was a storm of feeling, a tangled knot of vindication and guilt, of power and fear. She had wanted Marcus to hurt, to truly understand what he had lost. The stark reality of it felt different from Manasseh. Victor's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, a slow, cruel smile spreading across his face. Victoria just posted, dinner at La Cirque, with her father and his people. Marcus is nowhere in the picture. Show me, Elena commanded, and Victor turned the screen toward her. The photos showed Victoria in an expensive dress, beaming an influencer's practiced smile. The image airbrushed and posed. Richard Ashford sat at the head of the table, flanked by men who radiated importance. There was no empty seat for Marcus, no mention of his name. He had been erased. Elena handed back the phone. She's already cutting him loose. Predictable. Victoria is smart enough to feel the tide turn. Her father's opinion of Marcus cooled, and so did hers. In a week, she'll have convinced herself he never mattered. Victor put his phone away. This is a tactical advantage. When Marcus finally collapses professionally and socially, he will have no one to break his fall. The assessment was cold, efficient, and empty of all emotion. This was the world Elena had chosen to re-enter, a world where people were assets or liabilities, where loyalty lasted only as long as your utility. A world where a man's complete destruction could be planned over coffee with the detachment of a weather forecast. She had forgotten how cold it was, or maybe she'd just lied to herself that Marcus's world was different, that beyond Roman's influence, people were kinder, less calculating. It was a fatal misjudgment. Marcus was just as transactional as any of them, merely with less power and cruder methods. I need to get out of here, Elena said suddenly, pushing herself to her feet. Roman's gaze sharpened with clinical assessment. Are you unwell? I'm fine, I just need to walk, to think. A security detail will go with you, Roman. That is not negotiable. The protocols exist. His tone was soft but final. Victor, have Mikhail meet her downstairs. Elena choked back the protest. It was pointless. Roman's rules were absolute, and her 7-year flight had cost her any right to argue. She rode the elevator down in silence, met Mikhail, a quiet man built like a monument, one of Roman's oldest assets, and stepped out into the cool air. The city at night had always been Elena's favorite version of New York. The hard lines of the day dissolved, the city's chaos bleeding into a tapestry of shadow and light. She moved without direction, Mikhail, a ghost 10 feet behind her, as she navigated the war within her own mind. She had wanted this, to inflict a precise psychological wound upon Marcus, to make him feel the gravity of his loss, a pain that mirrored the one he had dealt her. But now, with the gears of his ruin turning, she felt only a void. It wasn't regret, nor was it guilt over a just punishment. It was a cold query into the woman she had become, one who could orchestrate a man's undoing and still find untroubled sleep. Her phone pulsed against her palm. She assumed it was Roman checking her position, but the screen glowed with an unknown number. Elena almost let it ring out, but a flicker of curiosity won. Yes. The voice was familiar, yet displaced from its memory. Sharon, from my old book club. I wasn't sure you'd answer. I know things have been, well, Marcus mentioned you two had separated. That's accurate. Elena's voice was a flat, polished surface, her mind already dissecting the call's intent. I'm so sorry. I know how hard that must be. Look, a few of us were talking, and we just wanted to reach out. If you need anything, to grab a coffee, someone to listen, anything at all. The unfiltered kindness in Sharon's voice was a startling, potent thing. These women had been her friends for years, trading thoughts on novels and sharing wine. They were creatures of a normal world, one that had never heard the name Elena Volkov. That is very kind of you, Elena offered, her guard remaining firm. We just want to make sure you know you're not alone. Divorce is hell, and Marcus? Sharon's voice faltered. Well, let's just say we all have our opinions on Marcus. A faint smile touched Elena's lips, a ghost against the grim set of her mouth. You do? Let's just say none of us were shocked he left. He always acted like he was waiting for a better offer to come along. Sharon's tone dropped a low, conspiratorial hum. Between you and me, you can do so much better. If only the woman knew the sheer scale of how much better Elena could do, or that she had already done so years ago in a marriage that had never legally ended. Thank you, Elena said, and the words were genuine. I appreciate you reaching out. Anytime. And you take care of yourself, you hear me? Don't you let him make you feel like you weren't enough. You always were. He was just too blind to see it. When the call ended, Elena stood motionless on the pavement, the phone still pressed to her ear. That simple exchange, a small act of solidarity from a life she had shed, was a crucial anchor. Not every human action was born of calculation and cruelty. Some people offered comfort with no ledger of debts, kindness with no expectation of return. She had nearly forgotten such a world existed, nearly let Roman's universe convince her that everyone was playing the same brutal game, just for different stakes. Elena turned and started back toward the penthouse. Mikhail seamlessly fell in step behind her. The walk had cleared the fog, though the central battle still raged. She felt more grounded, more certain of her path and the reasons for it. Marcus was receiving a fate he had earned. That truth was unshakable. Yet maybe she didn't need to savor the execution with such cold satisfaction. Perhaps she could be Elena Volkov without extinguishing the softer parts of herself, could inhabit Roman's world without letting its darkness consume every gentle instinct. He was exactly where she had left him, poring over contracts as if they were light reading. He glanced up, his eyes scanning her face for information. Better? He asked. Getting there. Elena sank into the chair beside him, letting his presence envelop her once more. A message from her former life, from a book club, had sparked an internal audit. The woman's simple kindness was a stark contrast to the calculated reality she now inhabited. Elena voiced a fear of becoming a monster, of her own empathy slowly eroding. Her partner, Roman, used this as a classic move to reinforce her bond to him, claiming that very conflict was why he was drawn to her. He framed her 7 years of resilience against their world's darkness as evidence of an unbreakable core, a tactic designed to cultivate her reliance on him. He met her doubt with the assertion that he knew her soul better than she did. His hand found her arm, a physical anchor for his narrative that she could possess both immense power and deep empathy. He sold their union as a sanctuary for her identity, not a threat to it, a framework she readily accepted to quell the war inside. Time bled away as the third week began, leaving only 7 days until the gala, 7 days until she would reemerge as Mrs. Volkov. The singular goal was a psychological ambush of her ex-husband Marcus to force upon him the full scope of his miscalculation. An operative, Victor, had acquired the guest list through his own shadowy methods. Marcus's name was on it, but with a notation of diminished standing, a quiet demotion. Victor estimated that after 3 more weeks of his orchestrated isolation, Marcus would be desperate for a rescue that would never come. The desired result was for Marcus Hale to feel the architecture of his life collapsing around him for reasons he could not fathom. Victor had asked if she was prepared to watch him break. Her response, "Ask me when it's over," was laced with a chilling uncertainty. 2 days out, she stood for a final gown fitting. The careful sculpting of the fabric was a key part of her metamorphosis, crafting a new self she saw as powerful, sleek, and utterly in command. The designer confirmed the transformation was complete. The Louis Vuitton heels were designed to add 4 inches to her frame, fundamentally altering her posture, her very presence. The designer, Anastasia, coached her posture, murmuring, "You carry yourself like you could purchase this city." Elena tried to deflect the credit to Roman, but was told she would be seen as the woman who helped him build it. Anastasia's final command was to move as if she owned every room she entered. That night, sleep was a stranger, her mind lit with acute anxiety. Lying beside Roman in the dark, she ran endless scenarios for the gala in her head. He knew her intimately, breaking the silence by identifying her state as planning quiet, a tell he claimed he'd learned over years of observation. He drew her close, a silent invitation to speak her fears. She confessed her nervousness, the dread of failure. His response was a sharp, absolute negation of her anxiety, a simple command, "You won't." Roman's voice was a law of physics, confirming that 3 weeks of relentless preparation had forged her into the perfect instrument for this performance. Elena's fear then narrowed to a single point. The moment she saw Marcus, the risk of an unscripted wave of pity or regret. Roman was silent for a beat, then deployed a masterful tactic. He gave her permission to feel anything that arose, framing any emotional response as an exercise of her own will, not a flaw in the plan. He spun the narrative further, recasting the event not as revenge but as closure, a concept far easier for her psyche to accept. He presented her with a false choice. Was this about hurting Marcus or about healing herself? The manipulation was flawless, creating a fog of cognitive dissonance in her mind until her own motivations became indistinct. The sheer scale of the preparation had made it all feel like a stage play where she had forgotten her own reasons for being there. At last, she found her true north. She wanted him to see her powerful, thriving, and utterly beyond his reach, to plant a seed of lifelong regret for having thrown her away. Roman deftly rephrased it as simply showing him what he could have had. He then told her to sleep, his voice laced with dark irony as he listed the immense stakes, reclaiming her name, proving her ex-husband's fatal error, before adding, "No pressure." A laugh escaped her, a genuine release that broke the tension's hold and finally let sleep take her. The Garrison Hotel, the night's stage, was a monument to the ego of a 1927 industrialist, a perfect theater for the unfolding psychodrama. Inside the grand ballroom, 500 of the city's financial royalty moved through the gilded space, an ecosystem built on old money, new ambition, and the people who serviced both. In a private suite upstairs, Elena watched her own reflection as if it were a stranger. The woman in the mirror was a polished weapon, designed to erase a humble past and project a power Marcus Hale had been too foolish to recognize. Roman's voice cut through her trance with a simple order to stop frowning. He dismissed her confession of terror, telling her that what she felt inside was irrelevant. The mask of absolute control was the only thing anyone would see. He decreed that the world would see only strength and influence, citing his 3-week observation of her as irrefutable evidence. But beneath the conditioning, her deepest vulnerability broke the surface. She voiced her truest fear, that Marcus would look at her and feel absolutely nothing at all. Her admission laid bare her reliance on his reaction for her own validation. Roman's expression hardened, his mind already formulating the next phase of his intervention. He framed any lack of interest as a flaw in her own perception, twisting the night's purpose back into an exercise for his ego. Victor's sudden appearance cut through the moment. He announced the guest's arrival, adding that Marcus was already showing signs of strain at the Ashfords' table. Reports from their network confirmed he was being isolated. His desperation was palpable, and his efforts to ingratiate himself were falling flat. A mask of perfect neutrality held Victor's features, but Elena saw the glint of satisfaction beneath it. The target is publicly unraveling, piece by piece. Roman checked his watch. The timing is precise. We will make our entrance at the height of the cocktail hour for peak observation. Every eye will be on us. Every glance will be catalogued. No pressure at all, Elena thought wryly. This room of gilded strangers is nothing you haven't faced before, Roman murmured, offering his arm. Let us proceed. It is time New York remembers who you are. The walk from the suite to the ballroom felt like a mile. Elena concentrated on the rhythm of her breath, the straightness of her spine, drawing on the armor Margaret had forged for her. The sound from the ballroom swelled, a wave of chatter, laughter, and the sharp ring of crystal. They paused at the entrance, concealed by the shadows. Victor had already moved ahead, confirming the stage was set to their exact needs. Roman gave Elena's hand a brief, firm squeeze, a silent transfer of strength before letting go. Ready? He asked. Her mind flashed with images. Marcus sliding divorce papers across the table on their anniversary, 7 years of making herself smaller, his final judgment of her as plain, forgettable, and easily discarded. Ready, she said. They stepped into the light together, and the change in the room's atmosphere was a tangible force. The talking did not stop. That would have been too obvious. Instead, it faltered, a subtle hesitation in the collective rhythm. Attention had been snagged, heads turned. The shift was quiet but absolute. The Vulov name still carried immense weight in this city. And Roman's 7-year absence from this world had been a subject of quiet gossip. His return with Elena at his side was a deliberate move meant to ignite speculation for the foreseeable future. Roman Vulov. The name was called by a voice thick with expensive liquor. Jonathan Pierce, a fund manager from Victor's file. I never expected to see you at a gathering like this, Jonathan. Roman's smile was a polished, impenetrable surface. Elena, surely you remember Jonathan Pierce? She did not, but she mirrored Roman's smile perfectly. Of course, how lovely to see you. Jonathan's eyes performed a quick scan, trying to reconcile the poised woman before him with the ghost in his memory. You both look magnificent. How long has it been? Far too long, Roman answered, his tone seamless. We've been keeping to ourselves, but some occasions demand an appearance. They moved through the crowd with an expert economy of motion, Roman nodding to key figures while guiding them toward their table. Elena saw faces from Victor's briefings and phantoms from her past life. A few met her with genuine warmth. Most offered calculated smiles, their minds already spinning, weighing what Roman's reappearance meant for their own ventures and allegiances. And then her eyes locked on the target, Marcus. He stood across the room by the bar, flanked by Victoria and a couple who could only be her parents. His tuxedo was too crisp, the fabric not yet broken in. As if he were a man playing a role he had only just been cast in. Victoria was a study in conventional beauty, blonde and lacquered, with a smile that was clearly a significant investment. Her hand rested on Marcus's arm in a gesture that read more as possession than affection. Marcus was speaking to Richard Ashford, his free hand making animated points. Richard's face was a mask of polite tolerance, the expression of a man simply waiting for a conversation to end. Elena watched this scene for a long moment, a knot tightening in her chest. 3 weeks prior, she would have been pierced with jealousy for Victoria, for her beauty, her wealthy family, her unshakable confidence. But looking at them now, Elena could see the cracks in the facade. She saw Marcus trying too hard, Victoria's gaze wandering, Richard's thinly veiled boredom. She saw exactly what Victor said she would, a man watching his ambitions crumble, completely blind to the reason why. Elena. Roman's voice was a low murmur tinged with concern. Are you well? Perfectly, just observing. We do not have to engage them. We can hold this side of the ballroom if you would rather. The kindness was real, but they both knew it was an impossible choice. The entire point of the night was to be seen, to make a declaration. Hiding from Marcus would render the whole exercise meaningless. No, I want to go say hello. Elena drew her shoulders back, the lessons from Margaret clicking into place like armor. Let us finish this. They crossed the floor, their progress slowed by greetings. Elena was acutely aware of Marcus in her periphery, waiting for the moment he would see her and for the inevitable fallout. A part of her longed to see the look on his face when it happened. Another part of her never wanted to see his face again. They were perhaps 10 feet away when he looked up. In the middle of a sentence, his eyes scanned the room, probably for a waiter, and they settled on Elena. For a single suspended second, there was only the blank assessment of a stranger. Then the information connected in his mind, and his entire expression fractured. The color drained from his face, his mouth hung open for a moment before snapping shut. He stared at Elena, not as a person, but as a hallucination, a tear in the fabric of reality that had allowed her to materialize in this room, in that gown, beside that man. Victoria felt the shift in his attention and followed his gaze. Her eyes narrowed, trying to place the woman who had caused Marcus to freeze like a statue. Richard Ashford saw it too. But unlike his daughter or Marcus, Richard's expression was one of dawning recognition. He had met Elena years ago, at events just like this, when she was first Roman's wife. His polite social veneer dissolved into something more cautious, more strategic. Roman steered Elena smoothly into their group, his movement a fluid, confident maneuver that made escape impossible. Richard, Roman's voice was warm as he offered his hand. It is wonderful to see you. I trust you remember my wife, Elena. Richard took the offered hand with the practiced firmness of a man who understands leverage. Roman? Elena, this is quite a surprise. I was not aware you two were attending tonight. We seldom go out, Roman replied, but this evening felt too important to miss. Victoria was still trying to solve the puzzle, her eyes flicking between Elena and Marcus, who looked as if he had just been struck. Mrs. Ashford, a gaunt woman whose face was pinched with a lifetime of quiet disappointment, watched the scene with a flicker of newfound interest. I don't think we've had the pleasure, Victoria said to Elena, her tone sweet but with a brittle edge. Victoria Ashford. Elena accepted her hand, her grip a perfect match. Elena Vulov, it's a pleasure. Vulov, Victoria echoed, and you could see the pieces click into place behind her eyes. She glanced at her father, then back to Elena. You're Roman's wife? I am. I was under the impression... Victoria paused, visibly editing her next words, no doubt about to repeat the story Marcus had sold her about Elena being the ex-wife. That is, Marcus led me to believe. Did he? Elena's voice was soft, conversational. She turned her focus to Marcus, who looked like a cornered animal. Hello, Marcus. It took him a beat to find his voice. I mean, he stammered, completely undone. You look different. Do I? Elena tilted her head, a motion she had copied from Roman. I suppose I have. It's amazing what can happen in 3 weeks. The number hung between them, a precisely delivered charge. 3 weeks since he served her divorce papers. 3 weeks since he called her ordinary. 3 weeks since he wrote off 7 years of their life as a nuisance finally removed. Victoria's gaze sharpened. You know each other? We were married, Elena said before Marcus could form a response. For 7 years. He seems to have omitted that detail. The ensuing silence was a thing of beauty. Victoria's expression cycled through confusion, dawning awareness, and rage before locking into a frigid neutrality. Richard Ashford's eyebrows climbed a fraction of an inch. For the first time all night, Mrs. Ashford looked genuinely intrigued. So you're his ex-wife, Victoria stated, her voice flat. Technically, the divorce isn't final, Elena corrected mildly. These things take time. Marcus finally found his words. What are you doing here? The question came out like an accusation. Roman's hand tightened ever so slightly at her waist, not to restrain her, but to hold her steady. Same as you, Elena's voice was a steady and calm. We're attending a charity gala. Roman and I lend our support to several foundations that this fundraiser benefits, the arts education program in particular. Arts education, Richard echoed, a new current of engagement in his voice. Is it the Meridian Foundation by chance? Yes, as a matter of fact, I've just taken over operational control. We're launching a full restructuring to focus program quality over simple geographic reach. A slight smile touched Elena's lips. It's been captivating work, learning the organization and the community it supports. Richard's entire demeanor shifted. You're the new director they hired. The committee's silence on your involvement was a tactical choice. Transitions need carefully managed information to prevent upheaval. Elena felt Marcus's stare, his mind struggling to align this version of her with the woman he dismissed just 3 weeks prior. The official announcement, I imagine, will be made soon. Fascinating? Richard's face showed a cool, clinical respect. I've observed the effectiveness of your new protocols. Consolidating assets to boost performance is a very logical strategy. Understood. The task is substantial. Elena paused, delivering with measured calm. Roman and I believe in investing in more than just financial returns. Philanthropy for at-risk youth in the arts seems like a natural place to begin. The implication was clear and devastating. Roman Volkov, who had just bought a 40% share of Richard's company and whose approval Richard now desperately needed, was married to the woman doing this prestigious charity work. Marcus, on the other hand, was just the lawyer who cast her aside, believing her inadequate for his goals. Victoria understood the implication, too. Her hand slipped from Marcus's arm, a minute gesture Elena had anticipated. "How long have you two been back together?" Victoria asked, her tone straining for nonchalance. "We were never apart," Roman said with a pleasant air. "Only a period of less public visibility." One grasps the situation. Privacy can be a more valuable currency than fame. The lie was a thing of beauty, clinically delivered. Watching Marcus's face, Elena knew the deceit had landed. He had ended things with a woman he judged to be isolated and powerless. The truth was, he had walked away from a woman married to one of New York's most powerful figures who had simply chosen not to use that connection. The realization dawned on his face in stages: shock, a battle with reality, horror, and then a soul-crushing understanding. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his words clipped. "I need some air." He moved toward the terrace without another word, his posture rigid, a man holding himself together by a thread. Victoria watched him go with a narrowed, calculating stare, debating whether to follow or to cut her losses. "You'll have to forgive Marcus," Victoria said after a beat, her smile a fragile mask. "He's under a tremendous amount of duress, work-related pressures." "Of course," Elena answered, her sympathy cool and distant. "The legal profession is filled with stress, especially when client relationships shift so suddenly." A flicker of something crossed Richard's face. Maybe guilt, or the knowledge that his distancing from Marcus was now on public display. "Well," Mrs. Ashford chimed in, her aristocratic voice cutting through, "this has all been quite revealing. Victoria, my dear, we ought to look at the silent auction before dinner is served." The command was an unmistakable social escape, a way to detach from the imploding situation. Victoria obeyed immediately, though she shot a final glance toward the terrace where Marcus had disappeared. As they departed, Elena let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "Your execution was flawless," Roman murmured. "More than flawless. Richard is thoroughly impressed. Victoria is reconsidering her choice in men, and Marcus appears to be having a complete breakdown. A cold sickness is starting to rise. Not in that dress. Anastasia would have both our hides." Roman guided her to their table, strategically placed on the far side of the ballroom, away from the Ashfords. "Sit down, control your breathing, the worst of it is over." Victor materialized at her side, holding a glass of water that Elena accepted on instinct. "That was handled perfectly," Victor noted, sliding into the next chair. "Richard is already spreading the word about your work with the foundation. Victoria looks like a woman reevaluating her life choices, and Marcus—" He glanced at the terrace. "Marcus is learning an expensive lesson about making assumptions." Elena drank the water, willing the tremor in her hands to stop. The mission was complete. She had faced Marcus, shown him the scale of his error, and cemented his disastrous mistake in the public eye. The result should feel like a victory, a moment of triumph. Instead, she felt a vast, hollowing emptiness. "I need a minute," she said, standing. "I'm going to the ladies' room." "Do you need me to come with you?" Victor asked. "No, I just need a moment alone. I'll be fine." The women's lounge was thankfully empty. a silent space of polished marble and expensive hardware. Elena gripped the edge of the counter, staring at her reflection, trying to match the woman in the mirror with the turmoil inside. The reflection was composed, powerful, a winner. She felt as if she had just brutalized an animal. The door swung open and Victoria Ashford walked in, stopping short when she saw Elena. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then Victoria moved to the mirror, adjusting her lipstick to buy herself time to think. "So," Victoria finally said, not looking at her directly, "you're the ex-wife, the current wife, it seems, of Roman. I take it the divorce from Marcus isn't final, because you were with someone else the entire time you were married." Victoria's laugh was brittle. "Does Marcus know you were still married to Roman when you married him?" "I was under the impression that I was divorced. The papers were never processed." Elena watched Victoria's reflection. "For what it's worth, that detail was also news to me until very recently. How convenient for you." "No, it was a problem." Elena paused. "What story did Marcus tell you about me? Only that you were his wife, that it didn't work out, that you weren't—" Victoria stopped herself. "Weren't what? Valuable enough? Ambitious enough? Or connected enough?" Victoria's silence was its own answer. "He gave me similar reasons for my own dismissal," Elena said, her voice quiet and surgical. "That my presence made him look ordinary, that I didn't fit into his new world, that he needed someone who was a reflection of his own ambition." She met Victoria's eyes in the mirror. "Did he say any of that to you?" "Parts of it." Victoria's voice was cautious. "He said you grew apart, that you wanted different things. We did want different things. I wanted a partner. He wanted an accessory." Elena moved to a sink, turning on the water in a deliberate, calming motion. "For the record, I'm not here to cause problems for you. I am here to present Marcus with the facts of his mistake. Your involvement is just collateral damage." "Collateral damage?" Victoria repeated. "That's a very clean way of saying you're destroying his career and his relationship just to prove a point. I am not destroying anything. I am just living my actual life instead of the smaller one I was pretending to have. If that reality destroys Marcus, it says more about his fragile world than it does about me." Victoria turned to face her directly. "You're with Roman Volkov, the man who just purchased 40% of my father's company. I am. And you're running the Meridian Foundation." "I am." "And what exactly did you do while you were married to Marcus? Playhouse?" The question was less an insult and more a sign of genuine confusion, as if Victoria couldn't align this woman with the person Marcus had described. "I was in hiding," Elena said simply. "I left Roman 7 years ago, thinking I wanted a normal, simpler life. I thought Marcus could give me that. It turned out I was just trading one type of act for another. And now I'm done performing. I am stepping into my own identity, with all the power, connections, and resources that come with it." Elena dried her hands on a towel that probably cost more than her old grocery budget. Marcus wanted a powerful, connected woman. He had one. He just wasn't smart enough to see it. Victoria absorbed this, her face a blank mask. "My father's already pulling away from him. I've seen the signs. He doesn't take Marcus's calls. He leaves him out of meetings. Your husband's involvement just sped up the inevitable." "I know, and you don't care." "I wouldn't say I don't care. My empathy just isn't strong enough to make me step in." Elena walked to the door, then paused. "Victoria, for whatever it's worth, You seem smart enough to recognize a sinking ship. You might want to find an escape route before you go down with it. She left before Victoria could answer, stepping back into the noise and light of the ballroom. The chime of cutlery began as guests found their places. Across the room, Roman's gaze met hers, a silent question posed. Elena gave a subtle nod. She was holding together just barely. Warm air spilled from the open terrace doors, a stark contrast to the chilled atmosphere within. She could see Marcus outside, a silhouette leaning against the rail, his stare lost to the night. He looked smaller from here. A sense of triumph should have been hers. This was the intended final scene. Marcus, broken, witnessing his world collapse, learning the cost of underestimation. Instead, a profound weariness settled over her. Second thoughts. Victor materialized beside her, holding a flute of champagne. Something like that. Elena took the glass. Is it supposed to feel like losing even when you have won? It depends on the prize. Revenge? No. That thrill is always fleeting. Justice, perhaps. Closure? Victor shrugged. Only you can make that diagnosis. I am being deeply philosophical for a Thursday. I contain multitudes. He nodded towards the terrace. He has been out there for 20 minutes. No calls, just staring at the skyline as if it had betrayed him. Perhaps it did. Perhaps we all did. Elena sipped the champagne. Roman's words haunted her. This was about closure, not revenge. But she could no longer see the line between them. The differences in what follows. Vengeance is a cycle. It always demands more. Closure is a final act. You rewrite the story, then you walk away. Victor's tone was surgical, his question a precise incision. Elena moved through the evening's rituals, the dinner, the speeches, the auction, the hollow networking. She played the part of Mrs. Volkoff on autopilot, a specter at the feast, as her mind dissected his query. Was this an act of retribution or release? The question hung unanswered when Marcus drifted back inside, his presence in the room almost entirely erased. He kept his distance, a man avoiding his own shadow. He lingered at the edge of the crowd, a diminished figure, while Victoria watched from a calculated distance, and Richard simply looked away. Around 11 o'clock, as the evening dissolved, she ended up beside Marcus at the coat check. The air between them was electric with unspoken words as they waited, their gazes fixed anywhere but on each other. Marcus broke the silence. You kept things from me. Elena did not pretend to misunderstand him. A direct question was never asked. I asked about your past. You told me it was unremarkable, that there was nothing to tell. I said my history was complicated and I preferred not to share it. You heard what you needed to hear. An attendant handed Elena her wrap. You needed simplicity, Marcus, so I performed it for you. It wasn't real. 7 years? His voice was frayed. For 7 years, I didn't know you at all. For 7 years, you didn't care enough to even try. Elena turned to face him, truly face him, for the first time since everything shattered. You wanted a wife who was easy, who wouldn't challenge you, someone small so you could feel large. I gave you that performance. The error was not my secret. It was your relief that I had one. His face contorted. That's not fair. Fairness is irrelevant here, Marcus. Ending our marriage on our anniversary wasn't fair. Calling me ordinary wasn't fair. Using me for 7 years before discarding me wasn't fair. Elena's voice was level, almost dispassionate. I am not here to debate fairness. I am here to prove the mundane woman you thought you knew was a role I played. and that performance is over. Is this revenge? This is me. You are the one who has decided that I am a threat. Roman appeared at that moment, his timing impeccable as always. Ready? He asked Elena, offering his arm. Yes. She gave Marcus a final look. Goodbye, Marcus. I truly hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. I just hope you'll recognize it when you do. They left him standing there, stepping into the cool night where Victor had the car waiting. Elena did not glance back. There was no reason to. The purpose of her being there, whether for revenge, closure, or justice, was fulfilled. Inside the car, Roman took her hand. How are you? Elena considered the question, searching for the truth. A state of emptiness, satisfaction, sorrow, and relief all at once. Is that a normal response? After a night like this? Yes. Roman squeezed her hand gently. You faced down your past and you did not shatter. You've earned your emotional complexity. Opposite them, Victor was already on his device. Marcus has left alone. Victoria is with her parents. Allow me to deduce, Elena said. She is cutting her losses. A logical woman. Richard is already looking for new legal counsel. Whitmore and Chen will be notified by Monday. Victor glanced up from the screen. The matter is concluded, Elena. The fall of Marcus Hale has begun. By next week, he will be lucky to keep his job, let alone his partnership. This was the exact victory they had designed, the outcome she had wanted. But hearing it stated with such finality stirred an unwelcome feeling. Pity. Not enough to feel regret for her actions. Not enough to want to stop what was coming. Just enough to see his humanity, his flaws, his desperation, the fractures in his soul he could not yet see. Just enough to feel the weight of dismantling a man, even one who deserved it. I have to ask you both a question, Elena said softly, and I need total honesty. Roman and Victor exchanged a glance. Am I becoming a monster? Elena asked. Someone whose solution to a problem is to crush people instead of fixing things? No, Roman said instantly. You are becoming someone who understands that people must face the consequences of their choices. That is not cruelty. It is accountability. Victor considered for a moment longer. I think you are learning to wield power instead of running from it. Whether that becomes a negative thing depends entirely on what you do next. Tonight's mission was Marcus. Tomorrow can have a different target, a different purpose. The foundation, your charity work, the way you can leverage your power for things beyond personal revenge. He held her gaze. You are not defined by your darkest moment, Elena. You are defined by the sum of your choices. So what pattern will you create? The question stayed with Elena on the ride home in the elevator, and through the ritual of removing the gown, the shoes, the armor she had worn for the battle. She stood in the bathroom in Roman's shirt, wiping away the cosmetic layers, and thought about patterns. 7 years ago, she had run from power, knowing its cost. Tonight, she had reclaimed it to hurt the one who hurt her. Tomorrow, the choice of what came next was hers. Whether she used her power with grace or with malice. Whether she became the person Marcus thought she was, or someone new entirely. Roman appeared in the doorway, ready for bed. I can hear you thinking from the other room. It is a side effect of the evening. Elena dried her face. Thank you. For what? For allowing the night to be complicated. For not making me choose between satisfaction and my humanity. She turned to him. For understanding that I can be both powerful and uncertain at the same time. You do not need to thank me for seeing you. Roman pulled her into an embrace, and Elena let herself be held. That is simply what love is. Later, in the dark, with Roman's breathing steady beside her, she replayed the night's events. Marcus's dawning horror, Victoria's tactical retreat, Richard's swift betrayal, and the hollow feeling of winning a game with no real prize. Her phone vibrated on the bedside table, a text from an unlisted number. I am sorry for everything. You deserved a better outcome. M. Elena read the message for a long time. The words were too little and far too late. They both understood that. Still, it was a human gesture, more genuine than Marcus had ever been. It was an admission of his failure, a recognition of his loss, a sign that beneath all the ambition, a person capable of regret still existed. She did not reply. A response was not required. The message was not asking for forgiveness or another chance. It was a statement, an ending. Elena deleted it and put her phone down. Tomorrow she would focus on the foundation, on building something real, on being the woman she chose to be, not the one Marcus had failed to see. This night promised a final quietus. When she woke, she would be measured by what she built, not what she had burned. It was, at last, a kind of peace. The day after the gala broke beneath a ceiling of bruised clouds that threatened rain but never delivered. Elena awoke to an empty bed, Roman's precise script a black slash on his pillow. An early meeting, coffee is made, the day is yours. R. She accepted the gesture with a gratitude that felt too deep for words. After the spectacle of the night before, a deliberate performance of power and reclamation, this quiet grant of solitude was a form of restoration. Elena carried her coffee to the vast windows to watch the city stir to life below. From this height, the people moving on the streets were game pieces, their paths interlocking in patterns they believed were their own, but which were, in truth, an inescapable rhythm. Toil, shelter, acquire, rest. A cycle she had been trapped in for 7 years, a player in Marcus's story, acting out the part he wrote for her. Never again. Her phone buzzed, a sharp vibration against the glass table, a message from Victor. Whitmore and Chen just confirmed the termination of Marcus's contract, effective at month's end. I thought you would want to know. Elena read the words. This was the end. The last falling stone in the chain of consequence, not just the partnership, but his entire career, his life with Victoria, his meticulously mapped future, all erased. She braced for the expected rush of triumph, the vindication she had orchestrated over 3 weeks. It never came. What settled in its place was a weariness that permeated her bones. Thank you for the information, she typed. Do I need to maintain observation? Elena weighed the inquiry. Did she need a minute-by-minute accounting of his ruin? To witness his descent in real time? To catalog his agony like a scientist studying a specimen? No, she wrote. I'm done. Let him find his own way. The response was instant. Good, this is progress. Elena put her phone aside, finishing her coffee in the profound silence. Victor's diagnosis was correct. It was progress. The woman she was 3 weeks ago, shattered by his dismissal, would have needed to watch him burn, feeding on his pain to balance the scales of her own. But that version of herself was born from absolute powerlessness, a wound that cried out for witness. The woman she was now, in a penthouse, draped in silk that cost more than her former car, married to a man who shaped the city's skyline and steering a foundation with purpose, existed on a different plane. This self could afford mercy. or at the very least, a clinical disinterest. The dissolution papers arrived that afternoon. Elena signed her name without ceremony, feeling none of the emotional weight she had anticipated. They were just instruments, the legal echo of a connection that had functionally died weeks before. Marcus could finalize the dissolution. She had no more use for the title of his ex-wife when she held far better ones now. A week later, Elena watched 15 teenagers bring a mural to life in the Meridian Foundation's main studio. The strategy she had presented to the board was approved unanimously, and its results were already visible. 3 scattered programs had been forged into one, powered by triple the funds with half the bureaucratic drag. The young artists between 13 and 17 came from every walk of life, bound only by a common history of being denied a chance to learn. The lead instructor, Jasmine, who had been with the foundation for 6 years, stood beside Elena, taking it all in. "We could never have done this before," Jasmine said, her voice low. "It would have been 5 kids in a borrowed church basement with supplies we paid for ourselves. Look at them." Elena saw what she meant. True artist-grade paints, proper tools, a wall they owned. An instructor paid a living wage, not someone scrambling between jobs. Teenagers learning a craft instead of just being warehoused after school. "This isn't a handout," Elena stated. "It is an investment. These kids have talent. We're just giving them the tools to build with it. Still, it means something that someone is willing to do it right." Jasmine hesitated, then said, "I heard the whispers about who you are, who you married. Some of the staff worried this would be another vanity project for some rich woman. But then they see you here 3 times a week, see you fighting over budgets at midnight, negotiating with landlords. This isn't a performance, it's work." A small smile touched Jasmine's lips. "So whatever else is true about you, this part is real." The words struck Elena with more force than she expected. After 3 weeks of calculated appearances, of rebuilding herself as Elena Vulov and orchestrating Marcus's fall, this simple acknowledgement of her labor felt more real than revenge ever could. "Thank you," Elena said, the words feeling small but sufficient. That night, she met Roman for dinner at a small, unassuming Italian place in Brooklyn that took no reservations and cared nothing for names. It was his choice, and Elena understood why. After the gilded stage of the gala and weeks spent moving chess pieces, they both needed a place where they could be just 2 people eating pasta, their public selves shut at the door. "Victor tells me you called off the surveillance on Marcus," Roman said, turning his fork with deliberate calm. "I did." "Why?" Elena considered it, pausing with her fork over her chicken. "I realized I didn't care anymore, not enough to keep watching. He's just another man now, making mistakes and living with the fallout. He's not my problem." Roman watched her face. "That's a long way from where you were 3 weeks ago." 3 weeks ago I was still burning, now I'm just done." Elena set her fork down. "I won at the gala. He knows what he lost. Everyone who matters knows. Watching him suffer now adds nothing. It's just cruelty, and I have no interest in being cruel." "Even after he was cruel to you. Especially because he was. I won't become the kind of person who mistakes inflicting pain for healing." Elena sipped her wine. "Marcus treated me like I was a thing to be discarded. I proved I wasn't. That's enough." Roman reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "I'm proud of you. This woman, the one who can wield power without malice. This is who you were always meant to be." "I had good teachers." You had harrowing experiences. What you chose to do with them was all you. Roman's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. Elena, there is something I have to tell you about the last 7 years. The change in his tone sent a chill through her. Go on. When you left, I was shattered. My first instinct was to drag you back, to force you to remember us, to make you see that running away would never fix what was broken inside you. Roman's voice was level, but she could hear the old wound beneath the surface. But Victor stopped me. He said that keeping someone against their will isn't love, it's a cage. So I let you go. I transferred the trust, made sure you were taken care of, and I waited for 7 years. I would have waited forever. I knew, not hoped. I knew you would one day realize what I always had. You were never made for a small life or for small men. Trying to be ordinary was like trying to pour the ocean into a teacup. He squeezed her hand. But here's what I never told you. About 2 years in, I started to doubt. I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe you were truly happy with Marcus. Maybe it was time for me to let go. Elena's breath caught in her throat. What changed your mind? I saw you in a grocery store in your neighborhood. You were shopping for dinner. You looked exhausted, moving through the aisles like you were carrying something immensely heavy. Marcus was with you, but he was lost in his phone the entire time, offering no help, completely unaware of you. I watched you try to get his attention 3 separate times. He never even looked up. Roman's expression was a mask of neutrality. And I knew you weren't happy, you were hiding, and sooner or later, everyone runs out of places to hide. Elena felt the sting of tears, the memory of that day rising like a ghost. She had been trying to plan a perfect dinner for his colleagues, to be the perfect wife. And he had treated her like she was just part of the scenery. You saw everything and said nothing. What could I have uttered? The man is cruel to you. Come home to me. You would have called it a manipulation. The choice had to be your own, Elena. The realization had to dawn within you. Roman pressed her knuckles to his lips. But watching you awaken to your mistake over 5 years was the single greatest torment of my existence. Why tell me this only now? Because there is something you must grasp. The patience I showed you, the empathy, the resolve to wait, that is an anomaly in my world. In my world, people are either assets or liabilities. They are either of use or they are not. They offer leverage or they are removed. Roman's eyes held hers captive. But you were never an asset to me, Elena. You were always a person, complicated, stubborn, brilliant and broken, and I loved every part, even the pieces that made you run. Elena felt the wet tracks of tears on her face in this sterile restaurant where they were just 2 people at a table. That is the single thing that separates you from Marcus, she whispered. He loved what I could give him. You loved who I was. Precisely, and that is what I need you to carry with you. Power is a siren song. Control is a poison. But the moment you see people as pieces on a board, you lose the very thing that makes power mean anything. Roman brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. Stay human, Elena. Stay complicated. Do not let this world sand you down to something simple. The waiter appeared, a phantom of awkwardness intruding with the raw emotion, and the moment was used to rebuild their composure. They ordered dessert, changed course, speaking of the foundation, Roman's business, and the reportedly comical state of Victor's love life. When they finally left, Elena felt more anchored, her sense of self more clearly defined. 2 months after the gala, while buried in the foundation's quarterly budgets, Elena's assistant knocked. "Someone is here for you," Maria said. "She has no appointment. Says it's a personal matter." "Who is it?" "Victoria Ashford." Elena's pen froze mid-stroke. She had not seen Victoria since the gala, and had given her little thought beyond a detached curiosity about the wreckage with Marcus. That she would appear here unannounced was a tremor in the earth. "Send her in." Victoria entered, clad not in couture, but in sharp business wear that made her seem both older and younger at once. She hesitated in the doorway, an uncertain ghost, until Elena gestured to a chair. "Thank you for seeing me," Victoria began, her tension palpable as she sat. "I'm curious why you're here." "To be truthful, I'm not entirely sure myself." Victoria's hands were a knot of motion in her lap. "I've been thinking about that night, about what you said in the restroom, about being collateral damage. You were right. I was. Marcus used me just as he was using you, for what I represented, not who I was. The only difference is that I was blind to it until you made me see." Victoria's voice was quiet but laced with steel. "After the gala, after my father cut him off, Marcus came apart. The calls were relentless. He'd show up at my apartment trying to convince me we could fix it. He couldn't grasp why I wouldn't save him. Did you?" "No, because I finally saw what you must have seen years ago. He didn't want me. He wanted my father's money and his connections. The second they were gone, I was just as disposable as you had been." Victoria's eyes met Elena's directly. "I am not here to offer you absolution for him, but to offer my own apology for my role in your pain, however unwitting." Elena processed the words, trying to name the war within her, a clash of rage against a wave of vindication. "You owed me nothing," Elena said. "You didn't even know I existed." Marcus made certain of that. "I should have asked more questions. I should have wondered why a man like Marcus, so full of ambition, would accept a divorce settlement that was so clearly a defeat. The signs were there." Victoria waved a hand dismissively. "But I wanted to believe him. He was useful to me in a way I can't defend now. We were using each other, and neither of us was honest enough to admit it." "What became of him?" "The last I heard, he took a position with a lesser firm, a massive pay cut with no hope of climbing. He moved out of the city." Victoria's expression was a blank canvas. "He reached out several times, always trying to reclaim what was lost, never to understand why it broke. I finally blocked his number." Elena remembered Marcus's text from the night of the gala, the only authentic thing she'd ever heard from him. Perhaps that was his one moment of clarity before the old patterns pulled him under again. "I'm sorry to hear that," Elena said, and she meant it. "Are you?" "It would be natural to feel some satisfaction in his downfall. I expected to feel that myself. As it turns out, vengeance is not as cleansing as they say." Elena shifted in her chair. "Victoria, let me ask you something. That night when you realized who I was, what did you feel first? Betrayal by Marcus or the frustration of a failed strategy?" Victoria considered the question with visible honesty. "Both, I think, but mostly the latter, which says terrible things about me." She paused. "But that's part of why I'm here. Watching you that night, seeing the life you had built, with purpose, with power, with real work, I saw that my methods were the same as his. All optics and alliances, no substance, all costume, no character. And you want to change. I want to try. Which is why," Victoria took a sharp, nervous breath, "I'm here. I know the foundation is looking for a development director to handle fundraising and donors. I have no nonprofit experience, I admit, but I know how to navigate social circles, how to manage powerful egos, and how to turn capital into influence. I want to use those skills for something that matters, not just to polish my father's legacy. Elena's surprise was evident. You want to work for me? I realize it's an audacious thing to ask. I know I'm the last person you'd want near you, but I'm asking because I know I could be a genuine asset, and because I need to prove to myself that I can be more than an ornament. Victoria's voice grew steady. I am not asking for a handout.
I will go through the formal interview. I will provide my references and follow every rule. I am just asking for the opportunity. Elena studied the woman before her, the one Marcus had chosen to fill her place, who was just as much a pawn in his game as she had been. She could feel the raw need beneath Victoria's words, a hunger to be useful. She could also see the clear and present danger. Having Victoria here would be a constant, living monument to Marcus, to that entire season of her life. It would mean working alongside a witness to her lowest moment, no matter how unintentional her role. But it would also be giving someone the same chance she had fought for, to be more than the part she was cast to play. Tell me your real motive, Elena commanded. Not the speech you prepared? Some of the artifice fell from Victoria's posture. Because I am sick of being Richard Ashford's daughter. Because every man I date sees a dollar sign instead of a person. Because I watched you own that room not with your husband's money, but with a deep, unbreakable sense of your own soul. And I knew I had never felt that. Her eyes found Elena's. Because I am 28 years old, and I have built nothing except a better public image for my father. And I'm terrified that if I don't change course right now, I'll wake up at 40 and realize I never actually became anyone. That honesty was a disarming blow. Elena knew that feeling. She had lived inside that same terror at 21, before Roman, before she had learned what real power was. The fear that you might drown in the expectations of others. I will consider it, Elena said, but I need to be clear. If you work here, you will work. Real hours, real labor, real accountability. This is not a place to play at charity while your trust fund does the heavy lifting. We are trying to help children who have nothing, and that requires everything from us. Understood. And Marcus, if you are here, he is gone from your life, completely. I will not have his shadow in my organization. He is. Victoria's voice was iron. Completely. Any illusion of a bond we shared is now dead. It has been since I saw his true design for me. Elena's choice was a testament to the profound shift within her over 2 months. Send your resume to my assistant. I will look it over, and then we will schedule a proper interview. I am offering no promises, only a fair consideration. The relief that washed over Victoria was a visible thing. Thank you. I understand what it cost you to even hear me out. Long after she was gone, Elena sat in the silent room, contemplating second chances and the line between vengeance and growth. She could have simply turned Victoria away, savoring the small, cruel power of denying a desperate plea. But that would have been an act for Marcus, a decision born of old wounds, of becoming the creature her pain had shaped. Giving Victoria a chance was about forging the woman Elena chose to be, one who saw the complexity in souls, the possibility of redemption, and knew that true power was meant to raise others up, not to break them. She dialed Roman. Victoria Ashford just asked for a position, she said as he answered. A curious development. And your answer?
That I would consider it. A pause stretched across the line. Are you certain? That adds a new complication. Everything is complicated, but I believe she is sincere, and I believe she needs this, the way I needed the foundation. A chance to become something other than the person she was supposed to be. Elena paused. And besides, if I can work alongside her, if I can offer this and hold a professional line unburdened by history, then I have truly broken free from Marcus. Genuinely moved on, not just performed the part. That is a wise play. High risk, but wise. Roman's voice held a note of approval. You are building something real over there, Elena, more than just a foundation. It is a philosophy for wielding power. I am trying. Some days are less of a battle than others. That is the only way forward. One choice at a time. To be better, not bitter. Roman paused. Come home early tonight. I want to take you somewhere. Where to? It is a surprise. Just come home. The destination was the small apartment where they had lived in the first days of their marriage, before the empire and the penthouse, when Roman was still building rather than presiding. He had kept it all these years, Elena realized, preserved exactly as it was. For what? She asked, standing in the living room that felt like a memory trapped in amber. Because I needed a reminder of where we began, of what we were before the power, the complications, and the 7 years of silence. Roman walked to the window, overlooking a skyline far humbler than their current one. I come here to remember that everything I built was for us, not in place of us. Elena drifted through the small rooms, her hand brushing over surfaces that sparked ghosts of memory. The kitchen where they cooked because they had to. The bathroom where Roman taught her how to stitch a cut on his lip, a wound he'd taken defending her. The bedroom where they lay awake until dawn, mapping out futures that felt like impossible dreams. We were happy here, she said, her voice soft. We were because we were simple here, not our life, but us. We were just two people trying to build one thing together. Roman came to her side. I want that again. Not this apartment or the struggle, but the partnership. The feeling that we are creating side by side, instead of you living in my shadow or running from it. I want that too. Then let us build it. Not in reaction to Marcus, or for revenge, or to reclaim what we lost. Let us build what we are creating now. The foundation, our life, our future. Roman turned her to face him. I love you, Elena. I loved you when you were hiding as Lara Quinn. I loved you through 7 years of watching you try to be someone else. And I love you now as you are discovering who you truly are. But I have to know, are you here because you chose to be, or because Marcus left you no other place to run? The question was fair, and it was devastating. Elena saw the entire timeline flash before her. The divorce, the gala, the foundation, the slow, painful work of becoming someone she could stand to be. Both, she answered honestly. Marcus was the spark that lit the fire. But Roman, I didn't come back just to escape him. I came back because I finally understood what I spent 7 years avoiding. That power isn't the enemy, it's abuses. That hiding yourself doesn't make you safe, it only makes you smaller, and I want to be large now and complex and powerful in a way that matters. I want to build things that last and help people who are broken, and I want to stand next to you as an equal, not an ornament. Elena took his hands in hers. I am here by choice, not because I need a savior, but because I want a partner in all things. In Roman's presence, a sense of peace settled over Elena, a feeling of safety that had been a stranger for years. 6 months after the gala, a showcase of 300 artists proved a triumph. The event drew in $2 million, capturing the media's full attention as she watched from the wings. Victoria, now her colleague, proved herself fiercely competent. Theirs was a relationship of professional respect forged in a shared purpose, not a friendship. Victoria confirmed they had shattered their fundraising goal by 40%. Elena ordered an expansion, her eyes fixed on the impact, not the dollars. When Victoria mentioned Marcus's new chapter, Elena felt a genuine hope for his recovery. She acknowledged the re-architecting of her own past. Anger, Elena stated, is a poor investment of energy, her focus now aimed at creation, with the showcase as her testament. Her identity was being forged now in meaningful work, no longer defined by old trauma. Roman appeared at her side, his arm a silent anchor, his eyes affirming her newfound ambition. Later, she looked out at the city, the canvas of her private war. Roman's relentless work ethic had not changed. The news of Marcus getting engaged was met with a remarkable, hard-won neutrality. Elena expressed a detached hope that he might change his nature, using her own transformation as proof that it was possible. Roman's call summoned her, and she turned from her thoughts, moving toward him, toward the life she had once fled for 7 years. She had shed the old skins, the timid Quinn, and the terrified Elena from 7 years ago. The woman she was now was a fusion of her scars and her strength. This acceptance of her whole self was its own victory. She murmured her love for him. Roman looked up from his work, giving her his complete, undivided attention. Roman voiced his acceptance of every woman she had ever been, calling her flight a necessary part of her journey. He spoke of process, not perfection. The words resonated, a stark contrast to the 7 years she spent performing perfection for Marcus, a performance that had ended only in his disdain for the authentic, flawed woman beneath. Now, in this life, she had both partnership and purpose. She saw Marcus's cruelty in a new light, as the unintentional force that had given her no choice but to grow. Her own ascent had led her to redefine power as a tool for good, a lesson she knew Marcus would never be able to comprehend. That single truth, which had cost Elena 7 years of pain to learn, was one Victoria was now discovering for herself. Elena no longer performed or hid. She simply existed, one soul among millions. She moved between the powerful woman she was becoming and the quiet one she had been, finding a balance between influence and vulnerability, and she was at peace with it. Elena had finally understood that the goal was not to shatter, but to integrate. The 7 years of being deliberately made small were over. Her future was a dedication to wholeness, to embracing the very parts of herself that Marcus had tried to extinguish. The performance was over. The avoidance had ceased. Her path was now aimed at constructive creation, at using her power for pro-social ends. The greatest victory was not revenge, but the integration of her own soul. A calm settled over her, an effect she now associated with the steady, grounding presence of her partner, Roman. Her aim had been to become resilient, not to live a life without storms. Marcus's campaign to crush her spirit had failed to destroy the core of her strength. Now she slept, truly slept, beside Roman, the man who showed her that power and love could occupy the same space, and that to be vulnerable was not to be weak. Her future was the foundation, and her alliance with Victoria, 2 women forged in the fire of Marcus's underestimation. With Roman, she was a partner. Tonight, she was simply at rest, her mind finally whole. The character of Quinn was gone. The story of the real Elena Vulov was just beginning.